And offices. I am Sheila Siar of the Philippine Institute for Development Study. Virtually everyone is familiar with the word globalization. It has been around us for some time. We feel it. We are affected by it. We participate in its various processes, and we have witnessed both its positive and negative impacts. Like the ancient Roman god Janus, globalization has two faces, one promising and beneficial, the other threatening and detrimental. But the new globalization, which is the theme of our conference this year, and of the entire development policy research month, which we are celebrating this September, is different from the globalization that we commonly know, in the sense that it is marked by increased volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. In this conference, we'll take a closer look at this new era of globalization and the issues and opportunities surrounding it. Our resource speakers will help us understand this new globalization and four of its many features, namely worsening inequality, global trade restructuring, challenges to the provision of global public goods, and weakening of social cohesion and trust. Then we will cap our forum this afternoon with a discussion of ways forward to be led by key officials from the government, private sector, and the academia. To officially welcome us to this conference and tell us more about this year's annual public policy conference and our theme on navigating the new globalization, local actions for global challenges, I would like to call on our president at the PIDS, Dr. Celia Reyes.
Good morning, everyone. Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Ernesto Pernia, our officials of the National Economic and Development Authority and its regional offices and heads of attached agencies, our international and local speakers, colleagues from government, private sector, academe, civil society, and media. Let me also recognize, of course, former Prime Minister Cesar Virata, and we really appreciate his presence in our major events. DBM USEC Laura Pascua, DBM ASEC Clarito Alejandro Magsino, DFA ASEC Eduardo Meñez, DFA ASEC Grace Cruz Fabella, and DFA ASEC Jesusa Susana Paez. Of course, our colleagues from TECO Director Wen Chung Chang, and of course, our PIDS Board of Trustee Attorney Rafael Jutilla, who has been very supportive of all PIDS activities. And from the Vietnam Embassy, Second Secretary Nguyen Tai Giang, and of course our representative also from the Australian Embassy, Madeline Valde de Jesus. Of course, we have our representatives from other government agencies, and from international organizations, we have representative from WHO. Welcome. And of course, from the Embassy of Indonesia, we'd like to welcome Marati Firdeansha. And from JETRO, we have Mr. Takashi Ishihara. And from UNDP, Irina Velasco. And from the US Embassy, Josefina Cervantes. So we'd like to welcome everybody to the 5th Annual Public Policy Conference, or the APPC. As development practitioners, the month of September is an opportune time for all of us to highlight the importance of formulating policies and programs that are evidence-based, as well as promote awareness of the importance of policy research in development planning and policy making by celebrating the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM. The DPRM is an annual celebration led by state think tank Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, pursuant to Presidential Decree 247. Every year, in consultation with our partners in the DPRM Steering Committee, We decide on a theme, which could either be a burning issue of the day or an emerging issue that would be important in the coming years. So far, we have featured food security, climate change, health and education, jobs, regional integration, international migration, resilience, decentralization, and last year we focused on the fourth industrial revolution. The chosen theme is discussed in the various activities organized by PIDS during the DPRM, which include, among others, seminars, press conferences, and media appearances. Today, we are conducting the main and culminating activity of the DPRM, the Annual Public Policy Conference, or APPC, which is now on its fifth year. Through the APPC, we will examine closely the theme of the DPRM by gathering renowned and international and local experts and policy analysts from various fields, as well as representatives from the government, academia, private sector, and civil society to share their insights on the issues, opportunities, and policy options surrounding the theme. This year, we focus on the topic, Navigating the New Globalization, Local Actions for Global Challenges. What is this so-called new globalization, or Globalization 4.0, as the World Economic Forum calls it, and why should we give it attention? Globally, we're entering a new era of globalization. The past decade saw drastic changes in the way countries do trade, from the use of steamships and railways in the 19th century to more convenient means such as cars, ships, and jet engines after the Second World War, and the introduction of free trade in the 90s. With the development of new technologies along the way, world trade has significantly accelerated, with more countries participating in borderless and digital economic ventures. In recent years, not only are we seeing the spread of advanced technologies that are driving innovation in many parts of the world, we're also witnessing major challenges such as global trade restructuring, trade wars, worsening inequality, under-provision of public goods, global public goods, erosion of trust and social cohesion, and proliferation of disinformation. These are among the features of the fourth wave of globalization that we are already experiencing. I would like to liken this new globalization to a troubled sea that is full of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, or VUCA, and thus quite challenging to navigate. All this begs the question, how does the new globalization affect the Philippines? How should it navigate the troubled seas of the new globalization? If we do not manage the challenges of the new globalization well, it will have detrimental impacts on the Philippines by weakening the country's ability to sustain its rapid economic growth, as well as attain its long-term development vision indicated in Ambition Natin 2040 of a matatag, maginhawa, at panatag na buhay para sa lahat. It will also hamper us in achieving our targets and commitments under the Sustainable Development Goals. This is why we emphasize the need to understand the new globalization and how to navigate it. World Economic Forum founder and executive chairman Klaus Schwab said that if Globalization 4.0, or the new globalization as we coined it at PIDS, has only just begun, but we're already vastly underprepared for it. This is why we gathered you here today to help us explore local actions needed to address the challenges, as well as harness whatever opportunities that come along with the new globalization. This will be discussed later in the various sessions of the conference. To counter the challenges of the new globalization, we formulated our own VUCA, namely vision, unity, consultation, and adaptability. Vision means having a shared vision of prosperity, inclusivity, resilience, and social cohesion. We need to move in one direction to reach our common goal. Unity means creating a sense of cooperation among the government, academia, civil society, and the private sector to be able to overcome the challenges of the new globalization. Consultation means engaging the public to participate in informed policy debates so that everyone can be heard. Adaptability means we have to be resilient in managing the changes that come with the new globalization, and that includes being open to new paradigms, business models, and regulatory frameworks. I hope I've stirred your interest and have posed questions in your minds, which you are free to share later. Before I end, let me take this opportunity to thank everyone who made this possible. To our speakers, thank you for allowing us to provide a venue where you can share your insights. To our guests and participants, thank you for coming. I know the weather is not so good, but we really appreciate your presence today. And to my PIDS family, thank you for all your efforts in ensuring that we give our guests an insightful and fruitful conference. In particular, I'd like to thank the APPC Scientific Committee led by Peng Ballesteros, our Vice President, and our fellows who are in charge this year, Roel Briones, Mike Abrigo, Francis Kimba, and one more, Connie, the Koy. So they have been working very hard to come up with a very good scientific program. And of course, I'd also like to acknowledge the excellent preparations done by our Research Information Department team headed by Dr. Sheila Siar. And also, of course, the logistical and admin support provided by the team of Dr. Rhea Agkawili and the support given by Director Rene Ajayi. But of course, this would not have been possible being able to bring over the excellent speakers and organizing this conference without our sponsors, of course, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Department of Foreign Affairs, Department of the Interior and Local Government, National Economic and Development Authority, Philippine Competition Commission, Department of Trade and Industry, and the Asian Development Bank. So thank you for supporting this year's APPC, and we look forward to your support next year. Let me also thank our DPRM Steering Committee members, the Civil Service Commission, Philippine Information Agency, Presidential Management Staff, Department of Health, Department of Labor and Employment, Department of Budget and Management, Climate Change Commission, Senate Economic Planning Office, and Congressional Policy and Budget Research Department for your continued support to the DPRM. And let me end this speech by emphasizing that navigating the troubled seas of the new globalization will not be possible without everyone's participation. Today, let us make a conscious effort to share our knowledge, insights, and perspectives from which we can draw inputs and lessons that can be used in crafting relevant, timely, and feasible interventions so that we can face and overcome the challenges and take advantage of the opportunities of the new globalization. May this conference inspire us all to act locally but think globally. And let me also recognize, of course, our gracious sponsor from PCC, Chairman R.C. Balisacan, who's been supportive, very supportive of PIDS activities. I did not mention some of the luminaries because they would be speaking later on, but we have with us actually very, very excellent speakers. But before we start with the discussion, and of course from the Senate, from CEPO, who has been working closely also with PIDS, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of Ron Golding, who has been working very closely with PIDS. But before we start with the discussion of our panelists, we'd like to show you our video for this year's APPC. So again, thank you very much and good morning.
This is the world we live in today, a world where almost everything and anything can be done with just one click. Distance is no longer a barrier. Everything is connected. Information is almost never scarce, and anything is possible. These transformations are primarily driven by advancements in science and technology. Our future under this era looks promising, but it comes with challenges marked by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. The question is, are we prepared for it? There is a widening economic and social divide between the rich and the poor. This situation, along with the persistence of corruption, has increased people's discontent against institutions, making it easier to politicize issues and sow hatred, divisiveness, and fake news through new forms of media. Nations face uncertainties as trade tensions escalate to trade wars, posing great threat to the livelihoods of citizens of affected countries. Cooperation on global public goods, such as environmental management, public health, and peace and security also remains under threat. In the Philippines, the economic growth it has sustained in the previous years, as well as its ability to achieve its Sustainable Development Goal targets and long-term development vision outlined in Ambisyon Natin 2040, will all be at risk if the country fails to navigate this era of the new globalization.
Understanding the new globalization and navigating it are urgent tasks for all of us. We need to strategize on how we can deal with the challenges, as well as harness the opportunities that it brings. Our local action to be effective should have the following elements. First is vision. We need to have a shared vision of prosperity, inclusivity, resilience, and social cohesion. This means that we have to move in one direction to reach our common goal. Second is unity. The government cannot do it alone. We need the full cooperation of our partners from the private sector, academia, and civil society to overcome the challenges of the new globalization. Third is consultation. Everybody has a voice and stake in this. We encourage the public to participate in informed policy debates so that we can hear everyone's view on how we can mitigate the risk and at the same time harness the opportunities that come along with the new globalization. And fourth is adaptability. We need to be resilient in managing the changes that come with the new globalization. We have to be open to new paradigms, business models, and regulatory frameworks. We need to embrace the transformations and reforms that are necessary to adjust to the new globalization. These elements, vision, unity, consultation, and adaptability, are our antidote to the VUCA of the new globalization.
Poverty and inequality may be addressed by strengthening our social protection systems and making financial services accessible to everyone. We need to ensure that no one is left behind. The risk of job losses from automation may be averted by ensuring that the government, academia, and the private sector work hand in hand in equipping the current and future workforce with 21st century skills. We can leverage on the ongoing trade wars by attracting investments and businesses to locate in the Philippines by making our regulations investor-friendly, beefing up the capacities of domestic industries to participate in the global market, and improving government efficiency and transparency using emerging technologies. Meanwhile, the challenge of global public goods requires the collective participation of countries. The Philippines can do its share by focusing on mitigating the effects of climate change, given its vulnerability to disasters. The government and the private sector can work together and come up with incentives for firms and businesses that promote green economic development. Or simply, enhance awareness campaigns on climate change and educate ordinary citizens on how to prevent environmental problems from worsening. As nations open their borders to international trade, the risk of contracting infectious diseases heightens. Hence, the government should ensure that public health is prioritized, especially in disadvantaged areas. With the help of the private sector and civil society, the government can provide awareness campaigns on immunization and other health issues, as well as give trainings to health workers. All these efforts will not be possible if people do not trust their institutions. In the age of social media, where it is easy to spread lies and fake news with a click of a button, all stakeholders must ensure that information literacy, especially for the young ones, is pushed. Our homes and schools should be a training ground for children to learn the value of critical thinking. Our employers should also encourage trust-building efforts by practicing merit-based recruitment, promotion, selection, and performance evaluation, as well as taking a stance on issues such as gender discrimination, sexual harassment, and unfair labor practices. Most importantly, the government should let the people feel that it can be trusted by increasing its efficiency and transparency.
This year, we chose New Globalization as the theme of the 2019 Development Policy Research Month, or the DPRM. Every September, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies leads the entire nation in celebrating the DPRM to emphasize the importance of policy research in the formulation of evidence-based policies to address current and emerging development issues. Its main and culminating activity is the Annual Public Policy Conference, or APPC, which convenes and engages policy analysts, scientists, experts, and representatives from government, private sector, and civil society in a rational and evidence-based discussion of issues, opportunities, and policy options. With this year's theme of Navigating the New Globalization, Local Actions for Global Challenges, we encourage everyone to do their share in shaping the future of the Philippines amid the changing face of globalization. We are in this together. Let's make the new globalization work to our advantage. Sama-sama nating harapin ang hamon ng bagong globalisasyon.
It is my honor and privilege to introduce to all of you our keynote speaker, who is no other than the Secretary of Socio-Economic Planning and Director General of the National Economic and Development Authority, the country's premier socio-economic planning body. He is also Professor Emeritus of Economics at the University of the Philippines and Chairperson of the PIDS Board of Trustees. Our keynote speaker has a long list of achievements, which include being lead economist at the Asian Development Bank, regional advisor on population and employment policy for Asia and the Pacific with the International Labor Organization, chair of the Board of Trustees of the University of San Carlos, and director on the board of the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, or PAASE. He is also on the boards of some non-government organizations involved in education and health concerns and population and development. He is a former president of the Philippine Economic Society. Our keynote speaker obtained his PhD degree from the University of California, Berkeley on a Ford Foundation scholarship. He was the first recipient of the Outstanding Young Scientist Award in Economics and Social Sciences from the National Academy of Science and Technology. He was chosen by the PAASE for the 2015 Science Lectureship Award and has been inducted to the PAASE Hall of Honor in April 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all give a round of applause to Secretary Ernesto M. Pernia.
PIDS President, Dr. Celia M. Reyes, very impressive opening remarks as well as the show, the video. Former Prime Minister Cesar Virada, former Central Bank Governor Jaime Laya. Distinguished guests and speakers, there are so many of them, it's hard to name all of these distinguished friends and colleagues, fellow workers in government, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I can only scratch the surface of the 5th Annual Public Policy Conference, the subject of which is of much gravitas, and the challenges are formidable, characterized by VUCA. I will start with a light-hearted parable of the stag hunt. A group of individuals, gun enthusiasts, go out to hunt a stag. They need cooperation to be able to catch the speedy, agile, and nimble stag. However, like in any good story, the naughty devil dangles a temptation. Each individual can renege, leave the group, and catch the less rewarding rabbit on their own. What do you think they will do? Cooperate and hunt for the great stag, or take the easy way out by catching the feeble rabbit? This is a parable of social cooperation originating from the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Its ending tells us that the more there is uncertainty, the more there's ambiguity, etc., the more there is distrust, the more that the individuals will go off on their own and hunt the easy rabbit. My dear colleagues, the lesson of this story tells us the importance of beliefs in a society. Our mere beliefs and expectations can turn things around and enable us to get the highest reward. As Professor Kaushik Basu, former World Bank chief economist and professor of economics at Cornell University, wrote in his recent book, The Republic of Beliefs, open quotes, "The truth, the most important ingredients of a republic, including its power and might, reside in nothing more than the beliefs and expectations of ordinary people going about their daily lives and quotidian chores." It is this sense that we are all citizens of the Republic of Belief. Thus, to make any reform work, people must first believe in this society, in the administration. This administration is instituting a number of critical and broad-based reforms. We have the new Philippine Innovation Act, the Innovative Startup Act, the Balik Scientist Act, to partly deal with the fourth industrial revolution. We have the Ease of Doing Business Act and the Philippine Identification System Act, the latter aiming to give a national ID to each Filipino to ease transactions and obtain faster delivery of social services. For human capital development, we have the Universal Healthcare Law, free tuition to tertiary education, although we have mixed feelings about that, some of us, and the executive order to attain zero unmet need for family planning. All of this will be nothing but ink on paper if the whole citizenry suddenly lose their belief in our society's potential, Imagine making the monumental Bangsamoro Organic Law work if the Bangsamoro citizens themselves, in the first place, distrust the law. What we need is a whole of society approach to meet the objectives of the Philippine Development Plan 2017 to 2022 and eventually our ambition natin 2040 of a prosperous and predominantly middle-class Philippines where no one is poor. But it is also through cultivating a high-trust society that this whole of society approach could work. It is only through cultivating trust that we will make people believe in each other, each to cooperate and achieve our goals. In an environment of great uncertainty, ambiguity, volatility, and so on, where the next turn of events astounds and bewilders us, we need to reach out and build trust. Fortunately, we have recognized the importance of cultivating trust in our crafting of the Philippine Development Plan 2017 to 2022, which aims to lay down the foundation for inclusive growth, a resilient and high-trust society, and a globally competitive knowledge economy. Underpinning and resulting from a high-trust society is malasakit, or strengthening the social fabric, or in a word, solidarity, the first pillar of Ambition Natin 2040. Solidarity is needed between and among the citizenry for our country to achieve the objectives of the PDP 2017 to 2022 and the goal of Ambition Natin 2040. Trust and solidarity grease the wheels to make collaboration happen so that we can get the highest reward. I thank all of you for trusting us enough to turn up in this conference today. I ask the sharp and searching minds in this gathering to collaborate and think of solutions on how to navigate the era of new globalization. Trust us enough to share your ideas as we do not have the answers ourselves. We are currently doing our midterm update of the PDP 2017 to 2022. So, President Celia, we would appreciate receiving a copy of the participants' resolutions today to be incorporated in the updated Philippine Development Plan. The spade work of change still needs to be continued relentlessly. Let us stop ourselves being satisfied from catching the mediocre, easy rabbit, the easy prey. Together, let us aim for the stag. Thank you, and a pleasant and productive day to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insightful remarks, Secretary Pernia. Before we proceed to the presentations, we will take a 20-minute break for snacks and photo opportunity. So at this point, I would like to invite once again Dr. Reyes and Secretary Pernia, as well as all our speakers for a photo opportunity here on the stage. And for the rest of you, you may take your snacks or visit the restrooms. Please feel free to ask the assistance of our ushers and registration people. Thank you very much. We'll have a 20-minute break, ladies and gentlemen. Speakers and Dr. Reyes and Secretary Pernia, please. I'd like to invite you here on the stage for a photo opportunity.
Kung hindi niya mabasa yung maliit, kung hindi maliit, hindi, ganun na natin. Ayaw nga pala. Sige, pero okay na to. Sabi niya naman, pwede.
We will start in 4 minutes. Kindly settle down now as we are about to start. In 1 minute. Okay na. Welcome to our morning plenary session, wherein we will hear presentations by renowned experts in international economics, law and economics, and technology and innovation. They will give us an overview of the new globalization as well as its challenges and opportunities. This session will be chaired and facilitated by the Executive Director of the Makati Business Club. Prior to joining the MBC, he was Bureau Chief at Bloomberg News, Business News Head and Anchor at ABS-CBN News Channel, and contributor at Rappler. Friends, please join me in welcoming Mr. Coco Alcuaz.
Thank you and good morning. Good morning. As we proceed with this morning's program, in case you're not very familiar with the program yet, we're going to have 3 speakers, followed by 2 reactors, and then an open forum after that. I'll introduce the speakers as they come up one by one. And our first speaker is actually a video presentation. It will be on the Globotics Upheaval. I wasn't sure that word existed before today. The Globotics Upheaval, Globalization, Robotics, and the Future of Work. Our speaker for that is Mr. Richard Edward Baldwin. He's a professor of international economics at the Graduate Institute of Development Studies, Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva. He spent 30 years there researching globalization and trade. He has degrees from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, LSE, and MIT, and his most recent book, The Great Convergence, Information Technology, and the New Globalization, was listed by FT and The Economist as a great book in 2016. This is a video presentation, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Richard Edward Baldwin.
Sorry I can't be with you in Manila this afternoon, but I hope this video conveys some of the ideas that I'm trying to get across in my new book, The Globotics Upheaval, Globalization, Robotics, and the Future of Work. So let's just dive into it. I'd like to start with this slide. The future is unknowable, but also inevitable, because it reminds us that this talk, this book, is about the future, and as a consequence, none of us can be sure about what the future is going to be. But as the second part says, the future is also inevitable. So we, as social scientists, have an obligation to think about the future. And the worst way to think about the future is to just pretend it's going to continue being like it is today, especially when we live in a world where digital technology is changing many things very rapidly. Okay, let's just get straight into it with some definitions. Globotics, a very ugly word that smashes together globalization and robotics. Now, I invented it to emphasize the fact that digital technology is launching globalization in a new direction. At the same time, it's launching robotics in the future, in the new direction. In particular, when I talk about globalization, I'm going to be talking about telemigration, which is another word I invented. I'll talk a lot more about. And there I'd like you to think about it as RI, or remote intelligence. In other words, humans remotely providing intelligence in the advanced economy, offices in particular. And robotics, when I talk about that, I'm going to be talking about white-collar robots to distinguish them from the robots you read about all the time in your news feeds and you see on TV, the little physical things, mechanical things that often work in factories or whatever. And I want you to contrast remote intelligence and artificial intelligence. And what I'm really going to try and do today is argue that digital technology is accelerating both RI and AI in a way that's going to be very disruptive to service sector jobs in the advanced economies. Okay, telemigration, what does that mean? People sitting in one nation, working in offices in another. And since you are all in Manila, it's in a country where telemigration is actually relatively common, where Filipinos are sitting in the Philippines, but working in offices and service sector jobs in other countries. Now, when we come to white-collar robots, there's a low end, and a lot of it's called robotic process automation, or RPA. And if you've never heard of RPA, really do look it up. wait till the video is over and then look it up. But RPA is changing the world of work and advanced economies in a very, very quick way, and relatively few people know about it. Now, this is a picture of an RPA. It's essentially a software. Many of you will be familiar with macros, either in Word or in Excel, where you record a series of commands. And that's exactly what RPA is doing. RPA uses existing software, like say an email server, and databases or whatever, to automate a process which up till now is being done by a human, I should say. So for example, if you're working in the billing departments of a phone company, what this RPA does will open up the emails from customers, read the emails, using machine learning to figure out what they want, and then do what they want, whether it's to open up an account or change the subscription. And these things do it 100 times faster, and at least if they understand the email, with more accuracy. And also there's a record of absolutely everything was done, so there's no possibility of untraceable fat finger mistakes where somebody made a change just by mistake and didn't record that change. There's also white-collar robots at the high end. This is one of them called Amelia. These are essentially artificial intelligence platforms. Most of them don't have as presentational an avatar associated with them. There's Watson, many of you will have heard of from IBM, but many of the big companies have these AI platforms. And Amelia is in essence substituting or automating a much higher end kind of service task. So I was just talking about this yesterday in Davos, and a guy came up to me after my talk and says that he was doing auditing through an AI. In essence, they had humans collect the information, the billing and all that sort of stuff, the records. Then they had people in India, remote intelligence, doing some processing of it. And then the process was fed through an AI platform that looked for inconsistencies in billing or shipments or whatever it was. And of course, at the end, a real accountant takes over, but one aspect of the accountant's service job is being taken over by a high-end white-collar robot. Okay, by this time, most of you will be thinking, this is just old wine in new bottles. There's nothing new about automation or freelancing, international freelancing. I've just invented a few new words, get everybody excited, hope to sell a few books, and actually I do hope to sell a few books. But I would argue that this time is different. And when I was doing the research for this book, I found a number of systematic, what I thought were misthinking or incomplete thinking about what's going on. And I constructed a few bits of intellectual infrastructure to help myself understand why this time is really different. And what I'm going to do in the next few slides is share some of those with you. First of all, it's affecting service and professional jobs, not just factory jobs. That's absolutely critical. Globalization and automation for the last 25 years has been primarily a concern of the manufacturing sector, or at least the goods producing sector. These people who work in factories, they know all about competing with robots at home and China abroad. This time, the software robots and the telemigrants are competing with these people, and that makes a very big difference. Office and professional workers are different. There's lots of people there. 80 to 90% of the workforce in most G7 countries are in fact in the service sector, not manufacturing. Now the good news is that they're more flexible and easier to re-employ than manufacturing workers were. To a certain extent, service sector workers, or at least many of them, have a more flexible skill set, and service jobs all across the sectors draw on relatively similar skills, at least the base skills. Moreover, many service sector workers in rich countries are already in services where there's possibilities of getting other types of employment. My classic example of this is journalists in London. So if you go back 10 years, maybe 15 years ago, most of the journalists in London worked for newspapers, They had career prospects, they had nice pension funds and benefits. They had long-term contracts or indeterminate contracts. Now, many of those people have essentially been laid off by their own newspapers, and they have not become unemployed. They have started to work in different ways. They became freelancers. They're doing freelancing editing, or they do a blog, or they're making vlogs, or they're interviewing people. They're not really employed, but they have a very different job. And in some sense, instead of being openly unemployed, many of them will have had to accept lower wages and more precarious existence. So they don't have long-term contracts anymore. And third, they are not ready for it. The technology has protected the service sector workers from automation because computers couldn't think, and from globalization because many services were non-traded because of technological reasons. Now, this is just a chart showing that most people in the United States, this is for the US, work in service sector jobs. These orange, 9 million work in production, and 6 million work in construction and extraction, and everybody else is essentially in service sector. So these people are the ones who are going to be affected by the Globotics transformation, whereas these were the ones who were affected by globalization and automation over the last 25 years, if not last 200 years. Second thing, Digitech is ICT, information and communication technology. But ICT was applied to manufacturing, which is mostly physical and a bit of I and a bit of C. Whereas Digitech is applied to services, which is mostly I and C and only a little bit of physical. In other words, there's a lot of information and communication in services, whereas in manufacturing, although the information and communication was critical to the changes we saw over the last 25 years, it wasn't the main thing. Today's AI is different. In 2019, computers can read, write, see, speak, understand speech, and create visual output, and recognize subtle patterns. In 2015, they couldn't, so what changed? My answer is that the programming is different. How many of you have seen this book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, a psychologist who got the Nobel Prize in economics? Now, what changed around 2016 is that machine learning changed the way we program computers. Machine learning takes a large structured data set, and that means a data set where the question is clear and the outcomes are clear. And we estimate a very large statistical model with this data, going back and forth, trying to improve its ability to guess, then you test it and you move on. But this very large nonlinear statistical model at the end is guessing what is the answer to well-defined questions. It, in the end, is a piece of computer software. It's just not the logical one where you actually can know exactly where things are. Now, this new way of programming computers and the data and processing speeds that have come along that allow us to do it so well have given computers since 2016 a whole set of cognitive capacities that they didn't really have before. Reading, writing, seeing, recognizing patterns. And as a consequence, computers can now automate certain human tasks, almost all of them service tasks, that they could not before. And that's the big breakthrough. Automation is now touching a whole range of service sector tasks which were previously the exclusive domain of humans. Number 4, globalization is advancing at the explosive pace of digital technology. Past transformations were much slower. And this is continuing in my theme that if you were judging the past or today's globalization or future globalization on what happened in the past, you're probably going to be thinking it's going slower than it actually will. To explain this, I want to go through this little example of just how incredible digital technology can be. So this is a picture of Apollo 11, which was the first mission to the moon, landed a man on the moon in 1969. And Apollo 11 was guided to the moon and back by one of the most powerful mainframe computers on Earth at the time. It was an amazing feat. This is also a computer, very powerful computer, the iPhone 6S, and it came out in 2015. Now, the processing in this computer is 120 million times faster than the computer that sent Apollo 11 to the moon and back in 1969. That's amazing. 120 million times faster opens up the world to all sorts of things that weren't possible before. But what's even more amazing is that this is the iPhone 10, which came out in 2017, and its processor is 2.5 times faster than the iPhone 6S processor. What that means is that there was more progress in processing speed between 2015 and 2017 than there was between 1969 and 2015. So this problem of the accelerating increments of globalization is leading to this problem, which is it's coming faster than most believe. And in fact, it's predictable but unexpected. This happens so regularly that there's even a common name for it. It's called digital disruption. People know things are changing, they knew they were coming, they just didn't expect them to come so fast, and so they get disrupted. Companies go out of business, etc. Now, to explain this, I developed this little way of thinking about the whole thing. So I'm going to put progress vaguely defined on the vertical axis and number of years on the horizontal axis. And I'm going to assert that this is how humans instinctively think about progress. When I say instinctively, it's thinking fast. So, for example, when you think about the future, how likely it is that self-drive cars will come along, or most lawyers' skills will be automated by computers, you really don't have enough logical basis to think slowly about it. You can't think logically and conscious about it because we just don't really have enough information. So we almost inevitably revert to a more instinctual, thinking fast way. Our gut tells us that's likely or it's not likely. And what I'm asserting here is that our gut instincts are based on increments. So if we want to know what is the increment of AI progress in the next 3 to 5 years, we inevitably look to the increment of the last 3 to 5 years and assume they're roughly the same. Now, if you assume equal increments, what you get is linear progress, just like this. But that's not how digital progress works. Digital technology actually progresses like this, a lazy S-curve. It's a constant growth rate, which leads to exponential growth, and eventually it hits a sort of diminishing returns. But if you think about this, the contrast between how humans instinctively think about the progress and how it actually comes when it's driven by a digital process, we see that first our gut overestimates the impact. And what this is the alarmist, the people you often hear, probably you think I'm one of them now. Once they figure out there's some technology coming along, they tend to project into the future in a linear way. But actually, digital technology comes along very slowly because although it's growing at the same rate, each increment is very small because the increment before was small. That leads to a cumulative process and it turns up like this. But in the meantime, our gut tends to overestimate the impact. So for example, when they landed on the moon, I remember back then, the newspapers started talking about colonizing Mars almost immediately, as if it was a viable thing coming in the future. But by the same token, our gut then underestimates the impact because the progress accelerates in terms of increments beyond what we're thinking. So we get hit. And what I like to call where these two cross is the holy cow moment, where it's predictable but unexpected. And this is where digital disruption happens. People knew it was coming, they just didn't expect it to come so fast. Now this is actually known, it's a known thing called Amara's law in the world of technology. It says exactly what I said before. We tend to overestimate technology in the short run and underestimate technology in the long run. Now, these globotic changes, are coming in ways that few expect, or so I would assert. And again, to come back to the analogy, I think many people are expecting future globalization to arrive in ways that are like the way past globalization have arrived. So the first thing is think tasks, not occupations. Many jobs will go, but few occupations. For example, farmers and tractors. So what I mean by this is that when globalization and automation came in the past, the automation, and especially the globalization, often eliminated entire occupations in factories, sometimes eliminated entire range of jobs in, say, textiles or tires or things like that. This time, it will be tasks. And I think the misthinking from this comes from kind of science fiction, and a number of experts are sort of encouraging that. They project artificial intelligence, AI, as kind of like baby humans that are soon enough going to grow up. So you say, you know, a robo reporter can write certain types of stories now, and we think of that robo reporter as like a 7-year-old in elementary school, and eventually he grows up, and eventually he'll be just like a real reporter and do everything the reporter can and eliminate the job of journalist. But I don't think that's right at all. I think you should think about the AI as tractors and the journalists in that example as farmers. So tractors are not baby farmers just waiting to grow up. Tractors do certain tasks very well, and they mean that we need fewer farmers to grow the same amount of food. And it's certainly changed the profession of farming, but tractors are not going to replace farmers fully. In the same way, AI is advancing, but really what it's doing is changing the nature of many jobs, not fully replacing other jobs. Second, it won't look like Janesville. No mass unemployment, Rust Belt style. So Janesville, An American Story, was a novel, or a book which won a lot of prizes in 2017, which documented what happened to this small Wisconsin town, Janesville, when a GM plant shut down. It caused a lot of misery. Now that's not the way Globotics is going to be coming. Globotics will come a little more like this. Think iPhone infiltration. Now, what I mean by this is if you look at the iPhone, I can't demonstrate with my iPhone because I'm filming with the iPhone now, but in any case, if you look back at the iPhone, say 10 years ago, it was really a very limited thing. When Steve Jobs launched it, it did just 3 things. First of all, it was a very good music player. Second of all, it was a mediocre phone with a very short battery life. And third of all, it was a web browser, which wasn't very much use because there wasn't much Wi-Fi, and you needed Wi-Fi to make this browser work. But one innovation at a time, one progress at a time, it sort of came into our lives, and now these smartphones have completely changed the way we deal with the world, the way we deal with our companies and our employers, the way we deal with our children, the way we deal with our families, the way we interact with the cities in terms of maps and all those things. It's absolutely revolutionized the way we work. But here's the thing. Nobody decided to let that happen. It just happened. It was the consequence or the outcome of millions or billions of seemingly unconnected, seemingly small decisions that we all did in a disaggregated way. But after just 10 years, you look back and you say, how could we ever get along without them? And that's how I think both remote intelligence and artificial intelligence, driven by digital technology, will come into our work lives and change the future of work. It won't be sudden. In fact, for a long time, people won't even recognize that it's a trend, not just a bunch of turns and twists. 3, job displacement is the business model. Digitech is driving job displacement. Human ingenuity is driving job creation. Now that's a key distinction. It means the mismatched speed is the problem. So if you take this digital advance of job displacement, that means the job displacement is going to grow very, very rapidly and then sort of smooth out. And the job replacement, which is driven at a sort of normal growth process driven by human ingenuity, is going to be something like linear. Now that's very rough and heuristic, but it gives some very important insights into the world of work and the debate about automation and the future of work. So first of all, the pessimists assume we remain here forever, where the job displacement exceeds the job creation. This is where people are talking about mass unemployment. We won't have any jobs, so we need universal basic income and all that sort of stuff. Whereas the optimists assume we jump immediately to here, where human ingenuity and entrepreneurship have created all the jobs we need. Now that's why I'm first a pessimist, because I think in the short run, in the, say, next 3 to 5 years at least, the job displacement may well outstrip the job creation, and we may have a problem. That's why the second word in my title of the book is upheaval. I fully expect that this digital technology driving RI and AI may lead to a backlash or an upheaval in the advanced economies. So now let's talk about future globalization, or in particular focusing on telemigration. Telemigration, wage gaps make it profitable, digital tech makes it possible. Now when you think about it, globalization as a whole is always about arbitraging price differences. So in the early days, say from the 19th century or so, it was arbitrage on the price of goods, because some things were cheaper to make in one country than another, so they were made where they were cheap and then they were sold around the world. It was really arbitraging relative price differences. In the second phase of globalization, when knowledge could move across borders more effectively, we got the factories unbundling, and advanced economy companies like GM or Ford or Mercedes or Toyota, they took their firm-specific technology, moved it abroad, and combined it with low-cost labor, and that really changed the way globalization worked. They were, in essence, arbitraging the fact that technology to labor ratios were very different across the world. Now, what I'm arguing here is that the enormous wage differences in the service sectors across the world, you're sitting in the Philippines, for example, a professor in the Philippines teaching economics will typically earn 1/10 or 1/20 of what a professor sitting in Switzerland teaching the same class from the same textbooks will earn. Now that opens up an arbitrage possibility that was up till now blocked by technological means. In other words, it was just difficult to get the professorial services out of the Philippines and into Switzerland in a way that made sense to the consumers in Switzerland and the producers in the Philippines. Digitech is changing that by making remote workers less remote in a variety of ways. I want to focus on 4 ways. The first is domestic telecommuting. So here in the rich countries, companies and people are rearranging the way they work to make it easier to slot in remote workers. So for example, companies are changing the structures into matrix structures and organizing things around projects, becoming very agile. They're using cloud-based collaborative software, which makes it easier to integrate workers who aren't actually there all the time. Now, once our companies have found ways to slot remote workers in, they will soon figure out that they could get some of those remote workers for 1/10 the price or 1/20 the price, at least for some task, by sourcing them overseas, by sourcing telemigrants. So in essence, the spread of domestic telecommuting, which is a big thing going on, will lead the way to international telecommuting. Now, having foreign-based remote workers working in your office won't be quite as good as having in-place domestic workers in your office, but it'll be a whole lot cheaper, and I would assert that means there will be more arbitrage. In other words, there will be more telemigration, and that will bring service sector workers in the G7 countries into direct wage competition with talented, low-cost foreigners sitting abroad. The second is these online freelancing platforms. We talked about Upwork. It's the biggest one. It went public last year. It's worth over $1 billion now, and its revenue is growing something like 20-30% per year. It's basically like an eBay or Alibaba, but for services. So eBay and Alibaba help buyers and sellers of goods match, and underpins the financial arrangements and underpins the quality assurances. Now there's something of a systems platform competition going on. You have Amazon Mechanical Turk and Fiverr. There's a Chinese entrant into the market called Whitmart, but there's lots of other ones, freelancers. Many of you will have heard of them. These are like the container ship of telemigration. It's how the talented foreigner abroad will be able to come in, work into offices at least at the sort of retail level. Companies like Amex or Hilton, many of the bigger companies, are already setting up outsourced service sectors abroad in a more organized way, not through the platforms, but this will make a retail thing of it. Third is advanced telecoms. So telecoms are just getting much better. Here we are seeing an example right now. I'm giving this presentation remotely rather than actually being there. But we've all seen advances in telepresence systems, and it's now even going into augmented reality, virtual reality systems, holograms. Generally speaking, the telecoms is making remote workers less remote and making it easier for people in different places to work together as if they were actually in the same place, at least for certain tasks. And lastly, machine translation is no longer Star Trek. If you haven't tried machine translation in the last 6 months, you really have to try it because it's changing the world. It's on Google Translate. It allows you to do conversations or look at pictures, look at text with your screen of your smartphone, and it translates it instantaneously. If you go on YouTube and use the auto-translate captions, it takes natural language processing, say in Spanish, translates it to English, and puts the English language subtitles on the video in real time. Also, Microsoft Translator, if you're using Outlook, for example, you can translate your emails into or out of many, many languages. Now, it's not equally good in all the languages because the deep question is, do they have enough data? Do they have enough hand-translated sentences to train the machine learning? And where they do, English is frequently at the core of those things, it's gotten very, very good and getting better at an explosive pace. Now, when you put all this together, I think we're going to have a global talent tsunami in the service sector. So in some sense, the 1990s was about hundreds of millions of low-cost workers joining the manufacturing workforce globally. And that changed a lot of things in industry. In the 2020s, it'll be hundreds of millions of low-cost service workers joining the service workforce going forward. And I think that's going to change lots and lots of things as well, potentially leading to another upheaval. Okay, so now let me look at the future of work, the long-run future of work, once we get past the adjustments. First of all, I will assert that new jobs will appear just as they always had before. So when mechanical advances in globalization led to a very large fall in employment in agriculture, jobs appeared in the service sector, but also the manufacturing sector. And during this time, these service sector jobs and the manufacturing jobs were often doing things that people at the beginning could not even have imagined they would do. So, for example, some of the farmers who were leaving the farm to go to the factories, they were working at jobs in industries that didn't exist when they started to leave, so they couldn't even imagine them. So the idea that people will say, well, what will the jobs be? I personally can't imagine jobs, therefore there won't be jobs. I think that's ahistorical. It's not looking at what has happened before, and it's not trusting human ingenuity. So the future jobs, we can't know their names, but we can understand what they'll be like. So in other words, for example, when people left the farm, they knew they were going to industry, and they didn't know the names of their jobs, but they had some idea of what they would be doing in those jobs, what kind of skills they would need to work in a factory, even if they didn't know the exact name of the job. And I think that's what's going to be true as well. We're going to get all sorts of new jobs. We don't know the names of them, but we can think systematically about the skills we will need in these new jobs. So I would suggest that we use a process of elimination. Here's the assertion. Globots will do what they can because they're so cheap. Software robots have a marginal cost that's almost zero, and telemigrants have marginal costs which are very, very low. So if it can be done by remote intelligence or artificial intelligence, that task will be done by them. We will do what Globots can't. In other words, when we get reemployed, we'll be using skills and talents which RI and AI don't have. So the question then is, what can't Globots do? So first, let's take the first part. What can't AI do? Now, if you look at some of the studies, this one's from McKinsey Global Institute, where they looked to see, they asked a bunch of experts what current state of AI could automate in the workplace. and this is based on US data, they broke up the US task for all the professions and classified it into these 7 different categories of activities that are done. And then they found what percentage of those activities, taking real jobs starting at the micro level, could be automated with currently available AI. I mean, it's not automated necessarily now, but it could be automated because there's a big catch-up curve going on. But if you take predictable physical activities, 81% of that could be automated. Processing data, 70%, collecting data, 64%, etc. And as you sort of move down here, I've arranged them so that the automatability is falling. If you look at the things at the bottom and squint your eyes, you say, well, what are these things at the bottom? Managing and developing people, applying expertise, interfacing with stakeholders. These are the most human tasks. Tasks where humanity, creativity, ingenuity, ethics, dealing with groups of people, where those things are really important, those are the ones that are least automatable with AI. And what the red bars show is what fraction of time in the US is spent on these sorts of things. And they did the categories, so it's basically the same amount of time all across the board. So why can't AI do a human task? So this is the way I think about it. We're talking about the future, but this is the way I understand those results that came out of expert interviews. Machine learning is a jet engine, but big data is a jet fuel. So which tasks can't be captured with structured data? So many of the most human things we do really aren't involving things where the question is clear or the outcome is clear. Therefore, you really can't capture a large data set. Therefore, you can't train using machine learning and AI to do it. Therefore, it's not automatable because it's not clearly defined enough for an AI to train a model for it. Now, the other half, what can't RI do? Now, RI, those are humans, so in principle, they can do anything that we can do, but telemigrants can't be in the room. And that matters because some aspects of your job, just think about your own job as a to-do list, some aspects of your job require you to actually be in the same room, either face-to-face with other people or with some sort of machines. And telemigrants can't do that. Now, what that means is that whatever the jobs of the future are, it will involve a lot of being in the same place with other people or machines. So if you put that together, the long-run future of work is more human, more local jobs, or jobs where human task and being local are the most important thing. Now, hopefully, we'll be more productive and richer, and therefore more generous, so that's a good thing. The point is we have to manage the transition. We have to get past from the pessimistic view to the optimistic view. So, in a nutshell, this is what I'm talking about. Digital technology is launching automation and globalization at the same time because of the big breakthroughs that happened in 2016. And they are affecting white-collar and professional jobs faster than most think and in ways few expect. That's why I call it the globotic upheaval. I think our governments need to adjust, take account of the fact that these changes are coming very, very rapidly, and many people will have to change jobs from service sector jobs to sheltered service sector jobs. And when I mean sheltered service sector jobs, I mean jobs that are sheltered from both RI and AI. Okay, thank you very much for listening. This is the cover of my book, which has been on sale since February or so. It's sold by Orion Press and Nicholson and Widenson outside the United States. And I wish you the best of luck with and best of endeavors with the rest of your time. Thank you very much for listening.
I think that gave us a very good framework. And as I said, there will be 2 more speakers and then 2 reactors. We'll go on to the second speaker this morning. That is Mr. Calum Cameron. He's going to be speaking on competing in the new era of globalization. Cameron is, hold on. Calum Cameron is a digital innovation consultant, at Proud Engineers in Estonia. He helped build Estonia's startup ecosystem, and he headed a key European B2B and B2G startup accelerator. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Calum Cameron.
Okay, I've got 2 tools to work here and I can't get the first one going. We're doing well. Try that one. Cool. Good morning. So as a government, as public servants, how might we compete in the new era of globalization for our citizens and our businesses? Because those guys are already there. We're already consuming information, consuming services provided from all over the world in real time, from societies and from influencers, totally outside our zone of influence. And our businesses, they're already providing services and providing information also into these communities beyond our area of control. So how can we compete for them? And I mean for in that dual sense. How can we compete for them? How can we create the environment to enable them to take the greatest advantage of the opportunities that the new globalization and the digital economy provide? And how do we compete for them, as in how do we keep them? Because governments are now competing. Well, the governments have been competing for talent for many, many years now, talent and businesses. But now it's much easier for governments also to project their services across the world to other citizens and to other businesses. So how do we keep these guys engaged with us? And how do we plan for this exponentially different future? I mean, if we don't know what's coming, how can we prepare for that? So it sounds pretty challenging and pretty scary. Luckily, we've got a good idea how to do it, because for the last almost 30 years now, Estonia's been there. The Nordics have been there. The UAE, Singapore, not to forget China, are all developing in this space. So we have a playbook. We actually know how to build a digital society. It's just a matter of how do we execute it in the local context. And sorry, there's my challenge with working with 2 tools. Okay, so what we need is a platform. What we need is just what we need is a platform for the government to be able to engage in the digital economy themselves, the government to engage in this global real-time economy. Because as I said, our citizens and our businesses, they're already there. It's our governments who aren't keeping up at the moment. As well as engaging in that economy, they need the space, and this is really important, they need the space and the time to be able to experiment continuously. Experiment with regulations and experiment with new services. Because again, if we don't know what's coming, the government needs to be agile as well. The government needs to be able to iterate rapidly so that whatever opportunities do turn up, whatever challenges do turn up, they already have the infrastructure there to test out new ideas and to spin forward. So to be able to do this, the key message is quite simple. 2 things: we need to think like startups, and we also need to be able to digitalize our cores. And our cores are where the data flows between our key repositories, our key information repositories, enabling us to automate our decision making and automate our service delivery. And it's also where we have a universal, unique identity that allows us to actually connect the data and for businesses and citizens to take ownership and assert their rights within that digital world. So a good example to pick up on here before we move into the darker or the harder world, I guess, of governments is to look at startups. So in the mid-90s, or early 90s actually, there was an online bookstore that came out of Seattle called Amazon. Now, what Amazon did that was different to everybody else around them was they invested heavily early days into digitalizing their core. So they digitalized their logistics, they digitalized their warehouse, they connected those with their online store. So then they were able to automate pretty much end-to-end the process of buying and delivering the books or anything else that they sold on there. But it also gave them this agility to experiment with new services. So as they found... Oh, apologies. Is that better? Okay. Yeah, as they found what worked, as they found new services that they're able to deliver out of their core, all they did was commercialize them with new business models. They didn't need to change their core, they just plugged them in as new business models on top of their core. If you think about Amazon Marketplace. So as you probably know, Amazon Marketplace allows third-party resellers, competitors for Amazon, to sell on their platform. Now that started as an experiment, but Amazon Marketplace now is, I think, about 50% of Amazon's retail sales. 20% of their global revenue comes from these third-party resellers or competitors. Likewise, Amazon Web Services controls about a bit over a third of the global cloud services market. And it might be fair to say they even invented the global cloud services market. Again, that started as an experiment. All Amazon wanted to see is if they could rent out this spare compute resource that they had. And it took off from there. So these are two examples of how some experiments will work. A lot of stuff would have failed, but two experiments that actually worked. What if governments could think the same way, experiment the same way? Because Alibaba, Tencent, Google, they do think this way. And they're taking their agile models into healthcare, insurance, financial services, pretty much anything, anywhere that they want to. Because for them, these are not terrible, terrifying ICT projects. Still not there? Is that better? Okay. So yeah, these are not terrifying ICT projects for them. These are just new business models that they can test quickly. And because they've got these digital cores, it means that they can experiment very aggressively with small bets. And when they find something that works, they just invest into it massively to scale. Standard startup approach. And in fact, the playbook for building a digital society is very similar, at least in spirit, to the playbook for building a startup. So around the same time Amazon started, there was a new startup government in the north of Europe. So Estonia was just re-emerging from 50 years of Soviet occupation. They had gone into the occupation somewhat unwillingly as a relatively wealthy nation. They were wealthier than Finland, their neighbour to the north, and on par with Sweden, Denmark and the likes. They came out of that occupation as one of the poorest countries in Europe, but with government institutions to totally rebuild and their infrastructure totally destroyed. They literally had nothing other than a fierce sense of pride and some very, very smart people. So what they did is they went digital. And it sounds pretty obvious now, but back then, in the early days of the web, and if you think that Jeff Bezos had problems convincing his investors to digitize when hardly anybody was using the web yet, think about when a country tries to do the same. But again, they didn't really have a lot of choice because the governments that they wanted to emulate, Sweden, Germany, Denmark, they couldn't afford that sort of government. So taking this big, bold gamble on digitizing was pretty much the only thing they could do. So they went for it and they went at it hard. They digitized all their records. They then connected the data repositories so information could flow easily between them. And on top of that, they were able to then automate the decision making, automate the service delivery as much as possible. And of course, they made the national identity mandatory. So everybody has the opportunity to participate in this digital space if they choose to do so. And now, 99% of Estonia's public services are online. They reckon that the economy itself is 2% more productive just because people can digitally authenticate themselves and digitally sign documents that are the legal equivalent of a handwritten signature. So we don't have queuing We don't have to pass documents backwards and forwards. We can sign things literally with a single click. And it also means that they're able to embrace new challenges, new regulations. So for example, I don't know what the situation has been like here in the Philippines, but there's been a major challenge to existing structures in Europe and elsewhere with ride sharing, like Uber. I guess you've got Grab Taxi. Bolt is the big company from Estonia that's kicking Uber out of Europe. Estonia was the first European government that was able to sit down with the ride-sharing companies and work out how to legalize their services outside the standard taxi regulations. And what they've done is they've just digitally connected every driver to the Tax and Customs Board. So they're able to spin very quickly because they've got that digital core. They don't have to worry too much about how difficult the implementation is going to be. They can just run and work out what's going to work at a cultural, political, legal level. And then at the implementation level, it's a matter of little bits of code. So very, very simple. I think Singapore is heading down the same line. Actually, I think they're about to launch they are launching their national digital identity. They expect that to be, I think, mass deployment in about 3 to 4 years. So they're about 20 years behind Estonia on that one. But they've understood that this is where you have to go. I really love the way that Singapore focus on the human-centric side, at least with their messaging. This idea of, I think it was digital to the core, but served from the heart, works really nicely. So this here, this is the pretty version of Estonia's digital core. So as you can see, you've got, or hopefully you can see, you've got data flowing between public and private registries over Estonia's secure national interoperability platform called X-Road. And you've got a national digital identity that controls access to data and access to services there. That's at a simple level. What this doesn't show, of course, are the national policies, the interagency collaborations, the institutions that actually make all of this work. So I think a fuller view would actually have this view of connected data, the identification or the digital identification and the trust services, and then the policies and those institutional collaborations that make it all work. And this here is what it looks like at the data layer. So this one here makes it look very pretty and simple. This one here shows what it's really like. There are about 600 institutions, public and private, connected through X-Road, sharing data, automating decisions, automating service delivery. Again, it works across public and private. So the important message from this slide here is that the data doesn't need to be centralized. In fact, I think with the Nordic and the Northern European social model, they're not allowed to centralize the data. You can't have just one person or one institution controlling it all. But what this does give them is a lot more agility, because there's a lot more autonomy and innovation down at the lower level where people have got control of their own services. And strangely, it actually makes it more secure and more robust. So Estonia, you may or may not know, withstood the first national or nation-state cyber attack and didn't really have a lot of impact. It was sustained for the best part of a month, I think, and there was only limited impact on the services there, because you've got 600 institutions here, 600 institutions that are using different tech stacks, different data structures. So if you want to compromise the service, you need to come up with at least 600 different attacks, and you need to run them all in real time, or all at the same time. I guess technically feasible, but very, very, very unlikely. So there's amazing cybersecurity gain in distributing the data like this as well. And this here is how Estonians see digital society. The bizarre thing is that most Estonians don't really think about it at all. They're not really aware of what they've got there. It's us who sort of look at it from the outside. I mean, I live in Estonia, have done so for many years now, but coming from Australia, having lived for a long time in the UK as well, I know what the rest of the world looks like, and Estonians are in this bubble where things are just seamless, things just happen so nicely, it's so hassle-free. But what they do is they take a very pragmatic approach. So if something needs to be done, Just do it. Don't make it hard, don't make it difficult. I mean, why should tax returns be hard? In Estonia, as a citizen, my tax return is one click. Literally, I go into the government portal, or the Tax and Customs Board portal, after I get normally I get an email or I get a prompt on my online bank, click the link, log in, return is popped up in front of me. As long as I'm happy with what's on there, I just click submit, and then I digitally sign it on my phone with my digital signing pin. That's it. And if the government owes me money, within a few hours, that will be in my bank account already. From next year, small businesses or small and medium enterprises will actually have the same service in Estonia. So the assumption is that if the government owes you something, they should just deliver it. You shouldn't have to fill out a series of forms and requests and so forth because they've already got the information that they need. And if they know they have to give it to you, then just do it. Don't waste our time. And likewise, if you owe the government something, or if you owe any business something, they should just make it as simple as possible for you to deliver that. It shouldn't be, again, that you have to go through lots of queues and lots of hassles to make things happen. I was actually told a few good stories last night about the fun here in the Philippines trying to do similar activities. Things that in Estonia, again, we have this luxury of it being digitized. It takes seconds. I understand can take 9 to 10 years to get done here, and possibly some far more human relationships to make it happen. Actually, that's one of the funny stories about why Estonia works so well as a digital nation as well, is that it means they don't have to talk to one another. Estonians are not necessarily the best communicators. So if they can avoid actually having to talk with somebody, that's awesome. They can create an app or they can have a website that does it for you. So I want to give a few examples, if I can, of what this looks like from inside, what it feels like to be inside this connected economy. And then we'll talk about what people seem to be mostly interested in these days is less about how wonderful it is and more about, well, what were the challenges, what didn't work. So we'll get to that as well. I'd like to, it's sad he's not here and missing being in wonderful Philippines, but I'd like to thank Professor Baldwin for introducing my daughter in his presentation. So my daughter Amara was born in 2010 in Tallinn. And once the midwife was happy that my daughter was healthy, that everything was okay, she went and registered her in the hospital computer, and my partner immediately started getting paid child benefits to her bank account. No touch, didn't have to do anything. That just happened automatically. You have to understand, Estonia has a massive population of 1.3 million, and they fight hard. I know, it's what, we worked out 1% of the Philippines population. I think every day you probably have more babies here than we have in Estonia in a year or more. But yeah, so because babies are so valuable in Estonia, new mothers automatically qualify for child benefits. And again, the question is, if you automatically qualify for something and the government has the data, why should you need to apply for it? It should just happen, and so it does. So this is how it works. An expectant mother, so in this case my partner, goes to the hospital, hopefully well in advance of the birth, and registers as an expectant mother. And the hospital creates a new record in their database, or in their system. When the baby's born, the midwife just adds the baby's details, height, gender, all that sort of stuff, to the mother's record, and that's it. That's the end of the manual work that has to be done. At least with recording the baby. I understand from my partner there's a lot more manual work to do after that. But yeah, so then the child's details are automatically transferred from the hospital system into the National Population Register. And because, as I said, there's this wonder with babies in Estonia, the Ministry for Social Affairs is constantly polling and looking at the population register for new Estonians. And as soon as they see one, they then go and they get the mother's details and they connect with the Tax and Customs Board repository to find out what the mother's salary details and bank account details are. Then they do their quick calculations and they start making the payments into the bank. So it's a business process that connects the Ministry of Social Affairs, the Ministry of the Interior and the Tax and Customs Board to then automate the payment of those child benefits very quickly. So no forms to fill out, no queuing, no waiting. So technically, this is actually relatively simple. But you can imagine the effort that's gone into actually agreeing the data sharing between the different agencies, the collaboration that had to happen there. And it took a long time for this actually to spin up. It wasn't so easy to start with. So one really, really key policy that made this possible was the once only policy in Estonia. The government is not allowed, or government agencies are not allowed to ask you for information that they already have. And likewise, an agency. Again, it seems pretty obvious in hindsight, right? So at the same time, agencies are not allowed to keep duplicate data. They're not allowed to create records of data that already exist. So if the Tax and Customs Board wants to get my address, they have to get it from the population register. And likewise, if I tell them that address is wrong, they will update it for me in the population register. So that there's this authoritative source of data at all times, which means you've got the confidence in the system to then start automating your decisions and your service on top of it. So once only was very key to that. This here, actually, the team that I work with in Proud Engineers, so these are guys who were very hands-on in building a lot of the infrastructure and services that are now e-Estonia. So the legals, the technology, the institutions, the data sharing, the policies. They were very hands-on in that. And they've developed their own index, or digital society index, which is more about what it takes hands-on to build it. So understanding the maturity of an ecosystem. And I think for me at least, the most insightful question that they ask, or the answers that are most insightful, are how do you use patient data, or how do you share patient data to improve the health outcomes? Because if we get the answer to that, we can understand a lot about the legal, the data sharing, the technological, the institutional maturity of the society, as well as the trust that the people have in it. So Estonia's digital health platform connects across the doctors and the hospitals all across the country, across the 2,000 plus islands. So if my daughter does actually get a fever, for example, when she's out on her grandmother's island in summer, she'll go to the local doctor. The local doctor will have immediate access to her medical history, her record of vaccinations, any allergies, blood types, all that sort of stuff immediately, so they can immediately discount a lot of things. They'll be able to work out straight away that one of the big plagues in it. So in Estonia, ticks are like mosquitoes here. So ticks are the bearers of the sort of most dangerous diseases that you can pick up in Estonia. So the doctor will be able to immediately rule out tick bite fever because she's been vaccinated, and they can work on other stuff. And then anything that the doctor, any medication the doctor gives her, any treatment, will be immediately available to my daughter's doctor in Tallinn when she comes back to us there. This here is just a quick snapshot of my online yellow card, which is part of the time-critical information that gets passed to the doctors or to emergency services if they need it. I don't know if you can see that there or not, but it shows what I've been vaccinated against recently. I've actually cut it out, but it actually shows exactly who the doctor was who gave that vaccination, and it tells me when I need to update them. Again, this is immediately available to any doctor who's treating me at any particular point in time. And this is particularly important if you're a paramedic. So there's an e-ambulance app that, in connection with the digital health services, or the digital health platform, and the emergency services, will tell a paramedic within 30 seconds exactly where a patient is, or a potential patient is. And if it really is an emergency, using the patient's ID, they can quickly pull up all that time-critical information I was talking about. So they can quickly rule out or rule in problems, and also make sure what treatment they can and can't provide out there, right? And also on top of that, it connects them to the hospitals. So then whatever they discover about the patient, whatever assessment they make and whatever treatment they make is immediately available to the hospital while the ambulance is driving there. So then the hospital is prepared for the patient when the patient comes in as well. So this is what all the connections can do, all the connected data can do with the identity. And the other great thing is we can now automate the collection of health data to work out trends, health trends within the country. Now I'm going to have to speed up a bit here, so it'd be great to maybe pick up some questions later on. Ease of doing business. In Estonia, it takes about 20 minutes to open up a new business. Only 20 minutes from end to end, for the time I sign into the portal to the time my business is registered and exists. Okay, I'm going to have to really speed up. Only one country has been able to beat that, and that's Oman. Oman beat our record of 18 minutes once. But of course, their business register was built by Estonians. Okay, just quickly, for those who've never been there, Estonia does actually exist. As you can probably pick from my accent, I'm Australian, I'm not actually Estonian. I come from the middle of Australia in a tiny little mining town, but I've been living in Estonia for a bit over 10 years, visiting there for about 25 years now. It is out there. The digital government platforms that they've been building for Estonia, for the 1.3 million there, are scaling to hundreds of millions in India at the moment, and tens of thousands in island nations in the Caribbean. So quick message here is what's worked in Estonia is they took an engineering mindset to building everything, not just the platforms, but the legislation, the policies, the organizations, institutions, everything was taken with an engineering mindset. What you need is built. And it's been designed by engineers, not politicians. So designed to work, not compromise, right? Now, I understand that I'm out of time, but can I have 2 more minutes to quickly go through these principles here? So we've condensed Estonia's learnings and what we've learned working with other countries around the world into 7 principles that every aspiring digital nation has to implement. Firstly, everyone in the country obviously needs access to the internet. Secondly, there needs to be a strong digital identity for people to assert their rights over data and for the data to be connected for them. Third, data needs to be interoperable. Need to be able to share the data between the siloed platforms. You obviously need to have trust. Trust from your people, trust in the systems that will actually deliver for you on the automation. And extending that, people need to understand how their privacy is going to be protected within those systems. So in Estonia, it's very transparent. I can see anybody who has looked at my data in an online tracker. If they can't prove that they had a right to access that or good reason to do so, they will be sacked immediately and potentially put in prison. So it's highly transparent and highly accountable. No legacy. Anything over 13 years old or any critical systems need to be rebuilt within 13 years, maximum. You can do it sooner, but maximum 13 years, because otherwise the technologies, the concepts, everything is out of date. And finally, you need to continuously engage with your citizens and with your businesses, and also with developer ecosystems. So for example, Estonian's code base is shared, a lot of it's shared actually on GitHub, and they get constant feedback from developers out there on how to improve it. I wanted to actually talk about a big challenge here, which was digital identity in Estonia. Estonia had the same problem as everywhere else, that nobody wanted this digital identity. There was no proof that there was a need for this. In fact, obviously Estonia gets covered in ice during winter. This was known as the most expensive ice scraper in the world because people used to chip ice off their windscreens in the morning with it. There were no services that you could use this for. But what the government did is they solved that chicken and egg problem by making it mandatory. Everybody had to have it. And once everybody had it, they started building services for it. Not just the government, but businesses. Actually, mainly businesses. The banks were the leaders on this because they wanted to push people onto their online platforms, but there was a big risk about authentication, identifying who was really behind the device, who was logging in. This solved that problem for them. Oh, thank you. So this is my digital identity. I think it's very memorable. It's only the last 4 digits that I have to remember. As you see, it's based on the person's date of birth. And thank you everybody for coming to my party. X-Road, the backbone, took about 7 years for that to take off. And it was actually the once only policy that actually forced the government agencies to share data across X-Road that made this happen. iVoting in Estonia, voting over the internet, it's been going since 2005. It has not been compromised once. In the last elections for the European Parliament, nearly 50% of Estonian votes were done via the internet. And that was also done from over 100 countries around the world. So this shows actually how, when you digitize, you can actually start serving your citizens wherever they are in the world. Okay, I've been told very clearly that time's up. So very keen to talk with anybody later who has any questions about Estonia and anything we can do to help there. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Justice Antonio Carpio, who is going to be speaking on defending Philippine sovereignty and rights in the West Philippine Sea. But as I begin to introduce him, I should mention quickly that as Presidential Legal Counsel from 1992, he worked on various reforms, including the telco liberalization, which made all of this possible, of course. So thank you to him for that. Justice Carpio went to Ateneo with an economics degree, germane to us today, and then to UP, where he graduated valedictorian in law in 1975. He put up and helped head the Carpio, Villarasa and Cruz law firm before joining the government as Presidential Legal Counsel in 1992. He joined the Supreme Court in 2001 and will be retiring next year from that. Aside from many of the decisions that he wrote there, he's also well known, or perhaps even better known, for the dissents that he wrote there. And that included recent rulings such as the dissent in the quo warranto ruling, which led to the removal of a Supreme Court, which was against the removal of a Supreme Court Chief Justice, a dissent on martial law in Mindanao, a dissent on the burial of Ferdinand Marcos in Libingan na Mabayani. But we know him, of course, most recently in the last few years for all of his work on the West Philippine Sea. Ladies and gentlemen, Justice Antonio Carpio.
Pleasant morning to everyone. Why is the South China Sea important? Why are we fighting over maritime areas in the South China Sea? The South China Sea today is probably the most important international waterway in the world. Some $5.2 trillion US in shipborne goods traverse the South China Sea every year. 4 leading exporting countries use the South China Sea for the maritime trade. You have China, you have South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. 65% of the petroleum imports of South Korea pass through the narrow Strait of Malacca, going to South Korea. 60% of the petroleum imports of Japan and Taiwan pass through the narrow Strait of Malacca, going to these countries. Today, 50% of the petroleum imports of China pass through the narrow Strait of Malacca. But before 2015, 80% of the petroleum imports of China passed through the narrow Strait of Malacca, and the Chinese were always worried that someone might block the narrow Strait of Malacca and the Chinese economy would grind to a halt. So China built 2 pipelines, oil and gas, and these 2 pipelines became operational in 2015. So 30% of the petroleum imports of China passed through these 2 pipelines from the coast of Myanmar to Kunming province, to Kunming in Yunnan province. This is about 2.7 kilometers at its narrowest. Now, the South China Sea is also very rich in fishery. It accounts for 12% of the total fish catch of the world. That's about $21.8 billion. Although it's a very small sea, it occupies only about 2.5% of the ocean surface of the world. Now, the South China Sea is bordered by 10 countries, and about 2 billion people live around the South China Sea, and about 300 million people depend on fish from the South China Sea for their protein. And the South China Sea is also rich in oil and gas around the coast. We have our Malampaya here, Reed Bank is here, of course, you know Brunei, rich in oil and gas, Sabah, Malaysia's oil and gas fields here, Natuna Islands of Indonesia, the richest gas field in Southeast Asia, the second largest in the world, and you have oil and gas fields here of Vietnam and China. So it's rich in oil and gas, and the South China Sea is also rich in methane hydrates. Methane hydrates are lumps of natural gas encapsulated in ice crystals that form at very deep places in the sea where the temperature is very cold and the pressure is very strong. And China has estimated that the methane hydrates in the South China Sea could fuel the Chinese economy for 100 years. So China has already test production sites for methane hydrates off the coast of Guangdong. A few countries have the technology to extract natural gas from methane hydrates. Canada, US, Japan, and China are among the countries that can extract natural gas from methane hydrates. And the total reserves of methane hydrates in the world is estimated at more than 4 times the combined reserves of oil and gas in the world. So the South China Sea is very important. About 200 ships pass through the South China Sea every day, here in the narrow Strait of Malacca. It's the second busiest international waterway after the Strait of Dover in the English Channel. And also, the South China Sea is dotted with small rocks above water at high tide. Even if it is just an inch above water high tide, under international law, that is considered land. It's considered territory. So if you have a lump of rock above water at high tide in the middle of the South China Sea, you are entitled to a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. What is the surface area of that? That's about 155,000 hectares. That's huge, more than twice the land area of Metro Manila, more than twice the land area of Singapore. So countries fight over these small rocks above water at high tide because they're very valuable. If you have sovereignty over this small rock, you own all the oil and gas and mineral resources, all the fishery within this 12 nautical mile area. And you can reclaim it to the edge of your territorial sea. That's what China has actually done. So countries fight over these small rocks above water at high tide. There are hundreds of them in the South China Sea. China did not participate in the proceedings at The Hague, but China presented a position paper. And in that position paper, China said Chinese activities started 2,000 years ago. We own the South China Sea because we were the first to discover, first to name, first to explore and exploit the islands and their resources. That is the historical narrative of China. This is taught to every Chinese citizen from grade school to college. So every Chinese general, admiral, Politburo member, diplomat, professor, businessman know this by heart, and they sincerely believe it. But it's totally false, absolutely false. It's fake. I call this the fake history of the millennium, the fake news of the century, and I will prove it. Now, in 2009, China submitted this 9-line map to the United Nations. Basically, China claimed everything within the 9-line. In 2013, China produced a new map. China added a 10th dash on the eastern side of Taiwan, so the 9-lines are still growing, but I still call it 9-line. And in this new map, China use this shading. You will see this shading in the 10 dashes here, the same shading that you find on the continental land boundary of China. So China treats the waters within the 9-dash line in the same way it treats its land territory. So the waters form part of the national territory of China. And that's why we protested this map. Now, let's go back to a little bit of history, what happened in the South China Sea from 1946 to 2017. Before 1946, the southernmost territory of China was Hainan. Throughout the Chinese dynasties, the southernmost territory of China was Hainan. There was not a single Chinese soldier or sailor stationed in the Paracels, in the Spratlys, or in Scarborough Shoal. Before World War II, the Japanese seized the Paracels from the French, and the Japanese put up a submarine base in Ituaba, the largest island in the Spratlys. Nobody occupied the Spratlys at the time. That submarine base was used in the invasion of the Philippines. With the defeat of the Japanese forces left, and China, for the first time in its history, made a move outside of Hainan. China seized half of the Paracels. The other half was recovered by the French and inherited by the South Vietnamese government. And in 1946 also, China made a great leap across the South China Sea and occupied Ituaba, took over the Japanese forces. In 1974, towards the dying days of the Vietnam War, the Chinese seized the other half of the Paracels in what is called the Battle of the Paracels from the South Vietnamese government. So China again expanded out of Hainan. And in 1987, China put up a radar weather station in Fiery Cross Reef. China said, we are helping UNESCO in its global oceanic survey. It was a very noble act. Nobody complained. Today, Fiery Cross Reef is an air and naval base of China, about 270 hectares of reclaimed land out of a very small rock that was above water at high tide. In 1988, China seized Subi Reef from the Philippines. It's part of our extended continental shelf, but we were not familiar with UNCLOS in 1988. It was not reported in the Philippine newspapers. In the same year, China seized Johnson South Reef from the South Vietnamese. There was a skirmish. About 65 communist Vietnamese sailors were killed. In 1995, China seized Mischief Reef from the Philippines. This was widely reported in the papers. In 2012, China seized Scarborough Shoal from the Philippines, widely reported in the papers. 2013, China seized Lucuña Shoals from Malaysia, very near, just 54 nautical miles from the coast of Sabah. 2015, China started building air and naval bases in the 7 geologic features that it occupies in the Spratlys. 2017, China seized Sandy Cay from the Philippines. I say China seized Sandy Cay from the Philippines because we can no longer go there, our fishermen cannot go there, our Navy, Coast Guard vessels cannot go there because it's surrounded by Chinese maritime militia vessels. Of course, the government is in denial that we have lost Sandy Cay, but we cannot go there anymore. So that's what happened from 1946 to 2017. So this dispute did not start in 2012 when China seized Scarborough Shoal. This dispute goes all the way back to 1946. Now, in 2016, February, before the ruling came out in July 12 of 2016, Foreign Minister Wang Yi of China gave a talk at CSIS in Washington, D.C., that's a think tank in Washington, D.C., and before all diplomats all over the world, Wang Yi said, China and the Philippines are very close neighbors separated by just a narrow body of water. Narrow body of water separates the Philippines and China. Can you imagine that? This is what Wang Yi has been saying. Since this is their national boundary, there's a sliver of water that is left for the Philippines as its territorial sea and EEZ. And that's why they say the Philippines and China are very close neighbors. And this narrative is taught to every Chinese citizen, from grade school to college, and they sincerely believe it because they have not been taught any other historical narrative. And that is our problem. Because even if we won already at The Hague, based on law, the Chinese government cannot comply with the ruling today, because if they comply with the ruling today, the Chinese people might overthrow the Chinese government for giving away sacred Chinese territory. Their mantra is they will never give up the sacred territory handed down to them through the generations by their ancestors. They will not give up a square inch of their territory. But that historical narrative, as far as the South China is concerned, is totally false. So, President Xi came here last November, and before he came here, before he arrived, Ambassador Zhao of China came out with an article in Philippine Star last November. And in that article, bylined by Ambassador Zhao, he said, being separated by only a narrow strip of water, China and the Philippines have been close neighbors for centuries. And I asked the Star editors who gave this picture. He said that picture was sent also by Ambassador Zhao. The subtle message is President Duterte and the cabinet agree with Ambassador Zhao that we are separated from China by a very narrow body of water. That's it. And nobody objected except me. The government did not object to this. And when President Xi actually arrived here, he came out with full-page ads, an editorial piece, an advertisement. He signed it, his own article, opened up new future together for China and the Philippines. And he said, over 600 years ago, Chinese navigator Zheng He made multiple visits to Manila Bay, Visayas, Sulu, on his 7 voyages seeking friendship and cooperation. Over 600 years ago. Why 600 years ago? This year, we celebrate the departure of Magellan from Spain on his voyage to the Philippines, 1519. He arrived here 1.5 years later, 1521. So 1521, that's 2 years from now, we will celebrate the arrival of Christianity, the arrival of Magellan. But President Xi says, oh, we were ahead of Magellan. We were here 600 years ago. More than 100 years before Magellan came, Zheng He was already here. But they were the first to discover the Philippines. They were first to name the Philippines, Mayi. That is their narrative. Of course, it's totally false. Now, that's the article of President Xi. It appeared in Philippine Star. It appeared in Manila Bulletin. Now, there is an international Zheng He society, and there's a chapter in Singapore. These are very serious people. And they came out with a book in 2005, and with several articles. And Professor Xu has an article there. Did Admiral Zheng He visit the Philippines? And his answer is no. Because the area that they said, mentioned in the chronicles of the colleagues of Zheng He, Chanseng, was actually a Ming dynasty name for a Malay state in Indochina. That is in central Vietnam, Da Nang. And that is where the Chams set up their kingdom. The Chams were a powerful maritime kingdom. They are descendants of the Austronesians. We are descendants of the Austronesians. So the Chams spoke a language similar to our language, because both our languages are derived from the Austronesian language. And that's why probably they mistook Chansen as Manila. But all the Zheng He scholars are unanimous in saying that Zheng He never visited the Philippines. He never even saw the coastline of the Philippines. And this guy, Zhu Xiangqi, he's from the Naval Hydrographic Institute of the People's Republic of China. He wrote an article in 1988 published in the International Hydrographic Review, that's in Monaco, where the International Hydrographic Commission is headquartered. And he drew the route of Zheng He So he came here from China to central Vietnam, hugging the coast, and he never visited the Philippines. He never saw the coastline of the Philippines. These are Chinese scholars way back in 1988. Last year, National Geographic came out with an article on Zhenghe, and they published the route of Zhenghe, the same. And the Philippines is here. So Zhenghe never even saw the coastline of the Philippines. And this story of President Xi is totally false. All Zhenghe scholars are unanimous. Zhenghe never visited the Philippines. Now, of course, we won at The Hague because UNCLOS says you cannot claim maritime zones based on historic rights. You cannot say that 2,000 years ago, your ancestors were in Manila Bay and therefore you own the waters around Manila Bay. Under UNCLOS, all claims have been codified. Every state can claim 12 nautical miles as territorial sea, and if there is space, still another 200 nautical miles as EEZ, and if there is still space, another 350 nautical miles as extended continental shelf. Total of 350 nautical miles. And the tribunal said there's no legal basis for China to claim because from Hainan, it's about 800 nautical miles before you reach Palawan, more than 800 nautical miles. But we had a problem because we anticipated that we will win, of course, under UNCLOS, but the Chinese people would not believe because they were taught a different historical narrative. So we took this opportunity to get the tribunal to rule that even historically, China never controlled the South China Sea throughout its history. Did China, as a matter of fact, have historic rights in the South China Sea? We asked the tribunal. The tribunal didn't have to answer it. But fortunately, the tribunal answered. So we presented Chinese maps from the Song Dynasty to the Qing Dynasty, the last dynasty, it ended in 1912. We presented our own maps. We presented European maps, the highest number of ancient maps submitted in any tribunal. And we presented also official documents of China during the Qing Dynasty. So we go to the ancient maps of the Philippines. I will only present one. This is the mother of all Philippine maps. And it shows what is important here is that Scarborough Shoal is here. For the first time in any map, Scarborough Shoal was given a name, and it's a Tagalog word, Panakot. Why Panakot? Because if you are the captain of a ship, you don't know where Panakot is, your ship will hit the rocks of Panakot, and that's exactly what happened to a British tea clipper ship called Scarborough. It ran aground. So European cartographers renamed the shoal Scarborough Shoal. This map also shows Los Bajos de Paragua. Paragua is the old Spanish name for Palawan. Los Bajos means the shoals. The shoals of Palawan, they are the Spratlys. This is the first map to give a name to the Spratlys. It is our map. And what is important with this map is this cartouche here. It shows that this is an official map of Philippine territory in 1734 because this is the royal coat of arms of the King of Spain, and it was King Philip V of Spain in 1732 who instructed Governor General Tamon to make a map of Philippine territory under the control of the Spanish crown, and he made this map. He commissioned Father Pedro Murillo Velarde, who commissioned Pedro Nicolas de la Cruz Bagay and Juan Suarez and Francisco Suarez. So that's the map, and this map is very important because when you say what is Philippine territory, you have to go back to this map. Ancient maps of China. China fortunately published an ancient map of China in 3 volumes, so they cannot disown these maps. It's their own publication, People's Republic of China, and it shows Hainan as the southernmost territory during the Tang Dynasty. It shows also Hainan as the southernmost territory during the Song Dynasty. It shows also Hainan as the southernmost territory during the Yuan Dynasty, and also during the Ming Dynasty, Hainan is the southernmost territory, and during the Qing dynasty, Hainan is also the southernmost territory. So we presented this before the tribunal, superimposed all the ancient maps of China, and Chinese territory ended in Hainan. Never reached the Paracels, never reached the Spratlys, never reached Scarborough Shoal. That was our submission. Chinese territory never reached Hainan. The French occupied the Paracels in 1932, and the Chinese government under the Kuomintang officially protested. And they sent a note verbal to the French government, and in that note verbal they said, the southernmost part of Chinese territory are the Paracels. China, by its own admission to the world, said our southernmost territory are the Paracels. We presented this to the tribunal. By their own admission, Chinese territory ended in the Paracels, 1932 already, and they never reached the Spratlys, never reached Scarborough Shoal. We have so many maps, so many documents, so I will no longer bore you with them. These are all documents from China. China came out with a handbook saying that their southernmost territory was Triton Island in the Paracels. We are already in 1943. That's the book. And in 1946, they revised that handbook. And for the first time, 1946, China claimed the Spratlys. They call it the Coral Islands, but they admitted that it is also claimed by the Philippines, Commonwealth of the Philippines, and Indochina, the French. So they never claimed indisputable sovereignty. 1946 already. That's the book, published. And that's the 9-dash line map, published for the first time in 1947 only. So China placed names already, but they just copied the names from British Church. And in Scarborough, they didn't even give a name to Scarborough. We were the first to give a name to Scarborough. If you go to the Paracels, you will see these sovereignty markers. You can see them also in the Spratlys. These are totally fake. Why? China came out with this book, published by the province of Guangdong in 1987, explaining why they named all of these islands in the Paracels and the Spratlys. But there is an interesting annex in the book, an editor's note. And in 1937, Wang Chang was sent by the Kuomintang, they were in control of China at that time, to check if the Japanese were occupying islands in the Paracels. So he went there. That was the cover story announced in media. But actually, he was on a secret mission. And he reported on his secret mission in a confidential report of 1937, July. And he said, I went there and I planted these sovereignty stone markers commemorating the inspection of 1902. He went there in 1937, he antedated the markers commemorating the inspection of 1902, 1911, and in about 24 places he placed these markers antedated. When China published this book, a lowly clerk saw the confidential report and included the confidential report in the book. And the book was published, and a Frenchman, François-Javier Bonneau, has done a lot of research in the South China Sea, showed me a copy. He Xeroxed it. He said, I found this in a library in Hong Kong. I said, I have to get a copy of that book. So I asked a friend who frequented Manila and Beijing. I said, go to the second-hand bookstores in Beijing, look for this book. And he found one copy, and I have it. And that's the photo of that book. They cannot deny. It's from their own government. And after that, I understand the entire all copies of this book have been withdrawn. But there's this another editor's note. In the Spratlys, there are stone markers erected in December 1946, erected in December 1946. When the book came out, the captain of the ship that was sent by the Kuomintang to go to Ituaba in 1946 went to the editors of the book and said, I captained that ship, but we never reached West York Island. We never reached Spratly Island. We never placed those markers. We only placed one marker in Ituaba. So the editors said these stone tablets on these two islands might have been erected by the Taiwanese Navy in 1956, not 1946. Because the Taiwanese, when Chiang Kai-shek fled the mainland in 1949 to Taiwan, he recalled the troops from Ituaba to help defend Taiwan. So they left. They went back only as a Taiwanese Navy in 1956. You go to the website of the Chinese Embassy in the Philippines, and there is a claim that Gu Sujing visited Scarborough Shoal in 1279 upon instructions of Kublai Khan, the first emperor of the Yuan dynasty. That's why they said, we own Scarborough Shoal because Gu Sujing put up an observatory there. That's the website, screenshot of the website. But in 1980, Vietnam and China quarreled over the paracels. And Vietnam has strong historical records that they own the paracels, but China said, oh, we have an older title because Gu Sujing put up that observatory in Woody Island in the paracels. That's the Beijing Review where they claim that Gu Sujing put up the observatory in the paracels. But now that we are quarreling with China, China is saying, oh, Gu Sujing put it up in Scarborough Shoal. That's the Beijing Review. It's very far, 380 nautical miles. Gu Sujing, brilliant guy. He was the Leonardo da Vinci of China at that time. He could not have made that mistake. Today, of the 27 observatories that Gu Sujing made, 26 on the mainland and 1 in Nanhai. There's still one existing extant observatory in Henan province, huge, 12.6 meter high, made of bricks, and you have here the sundial. You have to have people there operating this every day to measure the sunsets and sunrise. Could he have put it here? In Scarborough Shoal, you can place probably 10 people at most. That's Scarborough Shoal. If you superimpose that observatory, it's impossible. Physically impossible. Legally, China cannot use that argument. They use it against Vietnam already. Physically, it's totally impossible. I think I'm running out of time, so I will end here. And just one more. Wang Yi said, but in that talk in Washington, D.C., he said, the Philippine territory is governed by 3 treaties. The Treaty of Washington of 1898, the second, the Treaty of Paris in 1898, the second in 1900, the Treaty of Washington, and 1930, the treaty with the British. And everything to the west, everything to the west of the treaty lines do not belong to the Philippines, only to the east. That's the treaty. There were treaty lines, and unfortunately, Scarborough Shoal and the Spratlys were outside the line. So Wang Yi said, by your own documents, you cannot own Scarborough Shoal or the Spratlys. Let us go to the Second Treaty of Washington. When the Americans came here after signing the Treaty of Paris, they found out that there were many islands outside the treaty lines. Batanes, Scarborough Shoal, in the Sulu Archipelago. So they went back to the Spaniards. Hey, a lot of islands are outside the treaty lines. Let's clarify that everything is included, including Scarborough Shoal, Spratlys, etc. The Spaniards said no. The Americans said, on top of the $20 million that we paid you for the Treaty of Paris, we'll pay you an additional $100,000 to make this clarification. The Spaniards said, yes, we will sign. So that was the Treaty of Washington. And in the Treaty of Washington, Spain clarified all title and claim of title which Spain may have had at the time of the conclusion of the Treaty of Peace of Paris to any and all islands belonging to the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines, we also cede to you. This is the more important treaty, but this is not taught in our history classes. It's not taught to our school children. But this is a more important treaty because it includes everything within and outside the treaty lines. And what are those islands lying outside the treaty lines? We go back to the 1734 Pedro Murillo Velarde map. The official map of Philippine territory in 1734, that is what Spain referred to. Everything outside the lines of Spanish territory in the Philippines at that time. So there was a cession to the Philippines of Scarborough Shoal and the Spratlys that closes the loop. And that is why this map is very important today. It's still alive. It defines Philippine territory. This map was just auctioned last week for 46 million pesos. The last auction in 2016 was for about 12 million pesos. So it has grown by leaps and bounds because it's still alive. It defines Philippine territory. And this should be taught to every school children. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you for your kind attention.
We have, as I said, 2 reactors following those 3 presentations. The first one will be from Dr. Erlinda Medalla. She's a member of the Eminent Export Resource Committee of the Philippines APEC Vision Group. She's also, or was also, a senior research fellow at PIDS and has focused on trade, competitiveness, and industrial policy. Her PhD is from UP, and she was a postdoctoral fellow at Yale, Dr. Erlinda Medalla.
Good, is it morning or afternoon? Good lunch. I made a presentation. Is it there? Can I would rather identify myself as a former retired PIDS research fellow. I retired last year, and it's so good to be back, to be able to be part of this PIDS activity, which is the main activity of the year. And I'm so honored to be in the company of such, illustrious people. Can I have I'm retired, so I have time to do this, to prepare for the reaction. I don't usually do that. But I based this on the slides that I received, and the presentations were just so much richer. So I apologize beforehand if I'm missing some of the important points. So what I do is mention a little bit about the theme, and then try to string together the presentation, which is not that easy. Actually, I wanted to just concentrate on the first 2, because I learned a lot from listening to Justice Carpio. And then highlight some of the takeaways that I got from mainly the 2 presentations, and add my own simple thoughts about this. And I'm finding out now after listening to the presentation that I might have misinterpreted some of them, so bear with me. And then some closing remarks. So next, please. Next slide, please. Oh, there's. So, we all know how the globalization onslaught has affected us. It's a disruption. And and from the talks we heard earlier, it would continue to disrupt. And because of this, it has really elicited some pushback. Countries retreating, you have the Brexit, you have the trade wars, and some think that this is really the end of globalization. Maybe there's some truth to that in the sense of the world being more polarized. There are many more, poles. No? But that's why I like the theme of this conference. It's new globalization. It's globalization, but not as we know it before, because mainly technological innovation won't let us, won't stop it. But what it does is change the character of globalization. So Dr. Baldwin calls it telemigration. And we see this new form of globalization in data. We see that there's a slowdown in the global trade in goods and services, but this has been more than made up by the rapid rise in cross-border data flows. And I was looking for the article where they have nice graphs which show this, and I can't find it anymore. But but that's what is happening, and we see that from both presentations. Next, please. And so technology, it will change the character of global trade further. It will change the character of jobs and workforce. And new emerging risks will arise. And we see that, there's the climate change risk, and that there's the risk of the new tensions that we are witnessing. U.S. and China trade disputes. This is something that we felt, and this will come with, and then there's these territorial disputes, and it will come with human and economic costs. And these are very complex issues, and we really need workable and which are also very difficult solutions. And I learned a lot from Justice Carpio, and how important it is that we have a global institution to manage this. Openness and globalization doesn't mean we give up our rights. It doesn't mean that we we erase all those boundaries. Actually, what it requires is better enforcement and better knowledge about our rights, territorial and other fundamentals. It has to be very clear, and it is good to have some global framework or global institutions to help settle all these disputes. Next, please. So how do we navigate then in the new globalization? And we see so many complicated things, so many factors that are involved. And sometimes, when you look at it, it's mind-boggling, it's difficult to comprehend and to put all together. But the thing is, we have to realize that it's happening in multi-levels, happening in multi-sectors, happening in multi-facets, different ideologies, different disciplines across geography. And this has great demands for global governance, for regional governance, for national and local. And we need this. We need some form of global, regional, national approaches. But I think underlying this formation of this governance it doesn't come from nowhere. It has to start somehow. There has to be a big input from domestic and the local level. So the appropriate domestic and local response is also key. And this will be interactive. We have the domestic, the individual, the local, the national, and so forth and so on. These are all interactive. And navigating in this is not easy. And again, because of that, we need structures. We need laws and rules, no, which will help us navigate the new globalization. Next, please. And our speakers, our presenters, made some, presented some very insightful look and into our and gave us a better understanding, no, what it looks like. We need to understand what it looks like. And in particular, Dr. Baldwin now defines it, the new globalization, to be telemigration. Earlier, when I just looking at the slides, it's just RI. What does RI mean? So it's remote intelligence, and it made sense. Robotics, automation, which is not just the blue-collar type, but the white-collar type. And yes, that that is happening together is something that's mind-blowing. And he coined the term Globotics. It's really fast, and it's just a wave that could really praise most of us. And it has the implication in the future. After all the implications of this new globalization, it appeared to be more a threat than a benefit. But his presentation was very calming. It's very encouraging. It is true, it's proven in history. There are revolutions, first, second, third industrial revolution, and always new jobs appear. And the second implication is humans will do what RI and AI cannot. Also very encouraging. So I thought I'd pick those two implications. New jobs will appear, humans will do what RI and AI cannot. Next, please. Next. Okay. So I'm so encouraged by that conclusion. There will be more human and more local jobs. I just wonder when I was reading this and listening to Dr. Baldwin, automation will cover more and more areas over time. Where are the limits? I'm trying to imagine the future, the sci-fi type. And I'm sure there will be. But humans are so creative. Whatever limits there might be, our human creativity will outpace that. So in the end, yeah, I do understand what he means by more human and more local jobs. But I also wonder, what will the population look like by then? Is it going to be, are we going to stagnate at 7 billion, or are we going to double over 7 billion? And what does it mean if everything more and more is automated, and we have this globe with limited scarce resources? Will our human creativity also outpace these constraints that we will be facing in the future? But nonetheless, he concludes that we would become a richer and more generous society. And this is doable, I think, that we can become a richer and more generous society. I am an optimist by nature. So, and it doesn't have to be, I mean, there's no end point. We will continue to evolve. But the thing is, I think over time we will become a richer, more generous society. And here this clause, if we manage the transition. The same thing that I have met over and over when I was doing policy research and recommending policies. We have to manage the transition. And in here, the government has a crucial role. And we have heard this over and over again. We need efficient regulations, we need infrastructure, we need to advance the flow of information. But most of all, we need, so that we can only, you talk about digitizing government, But we can only make use of that efficiently if we have good human education, human capital to go with it. Next, please. Before I run out of time, I want to say something about Calum's presentation. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. I was so envious of Estonia. But then you said you're just 1.3 million people. Anyway, I thought at first that you were challenging both the public and the private sector to go digital. That it's digital first. But when I listen to you, you're really challenging government. And this is really a huge, huge challenge. I remember a time when we were trying to implement the national single window for trade. And it took us, I don't know if we got there already. So good luck to us. But it's possible. I mean, we might be very slow in adopting some, but I think we'd get if you just look at the people, you know, and the fast, the pace in which we're learning. So that I think that's the key, that the new technology, the digitization has allowed us to learn, to really learn quickly. Next, please. And yeah, the numerous benefits. So let me, can we go back, please? I thought this is the last one about the 7 principles of digital society and how difficult these things are to attain. That within and across countries, there will be varying degrees and way how to do it. Everybody will be trying to do things differently. And I wonder, is there going to be convergence or divergence? Because it's important that there will be a common understanding across countries as well. We digitize, and these countries, we should be able to speak to each other. But at the same time, I also looked at your, I understand better the graph on with the many points. And you say that there's advantage, that there's no central thing that controls it. That's actually builds more trust in the digital system, in the digital infrastructure. So maybe, I think we would eventually get there, but there are really so many difficult barriers. And again, we need to be talking to each other. Next, please. So it is not in Dr. Baldwin's presentation, it's in the slides. I want to pick this up. Again, humanity, we have to think of humanity as an edge, not a handicap. Okay, and that, yeah, we need local actions, but we cannot lose sight of the bigger picture. And governments would have a big role, and global institutions would have an important role. My time is up, so let me just hurry up to the last slide. Last slide, please. So in sum, all of us will have a part. You know, we all have a part. Actions at all levels, aimed at helping us humans to compete in this new globalization. But it is not just one way from bottom to up. It is two-way. It's also us, it's not just the top influencing us below, but us humans, that us contributing at the local, national, global levels to manage the global risks as well as this new globalization. And I had this example about a rational approach in the governance of cross-border data flows. I think this is one of the things which are going to be very important in the future. How do we manage cross-border data flows? And I found this paper which tries to suggest how to do it. And see in the red part, we have to be involved. This is our future, which we as individuals need to shape together. Not just our politicians, not just scientists, everybody would have a law. So I think let me end here, and thank you all for listening.
Our next reactor is Dr. Shell Habito. He's a professor at Ateneo de Manila University and former director there of the Ateneo Center for Economic Research and Development. He was a former Secretary of Socio-Economic Planning, the head of the NEDA. Before that, he was a professor at UP. He has worked at the World Bank, Harvard, the Kyoto University, and the ADB Institute in Tokyo, and he has degrees from Harvard and the University of New England in Australia, and also a BS Agriculture and Economics degree from UP Los Baños. Most importantly, he writes twice a week, very readably, in the Inquirer, no free lunch. That will not delay your lunch today. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Shell Habito.
Well, indeed, I realize I'm the one standing between lunch and ourselves, so I'll try to do this in a fast clip as soon as we can get my slides. Okay. I'm glad that Dr. Medalla did a faithful job of looking at doing the reaction of the speakers, because what I decided to do on short notice was to cobble together a few slides that I have been showing in other audiences. And so, for some of you who have seen these slides in other presentations I've made before, my apologies. But I think this complements the presentations that have just been made. And just four quick themes that I want to touch on. Again, the fourth industrial revolution, which was the topic of last year's conference, but also was very much part of the current globalization that we've been talking about. And then I'd like to situate that within our own perspective, particularly in the matter of demographic shifts and the shifting in global economic balance and how we fit in there. And then I end with something that I end all of my talks with, and some of you would probably know what that is now. Let me start by with the fourth industrial revolution. And we all know, and this word was used earlier, that it's the age of disruption, precisely because of the very rapid advance of technology. So we all know in the Philippines, there's a lot of jobs that seem to be under threat because of artificial intelligence. And they say that, no, maybe the ones that require humans, like the call centers, not quite. But guess what? Even that is very much under threat. If we look at, do we have the sound for this? Apparently not.
To schedule the appointment
There
for
you go.
Let's listen.
On the left will be a machine talking. On the right is a real person.
How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second.
You see how
Sure, what time are you
can
looking
be
for
done?
around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have a 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
So, a very natural conversation. Nobody, the other side wouldn't have suspected she was talking to a machine, to a computer. But, you know, just to show you that really, even call center jobs are under threat, here's another shorter example of what happens when the conversation doesn't turn quite as expected.
Take a listen.
See how may I hear you?
Hi, I'd like to reserve a table for Wednesday the 7th.
For 7 people?
It's for 4 people.
4 people when?
Next Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Oh, actually we leave here for like upper like 5 people. For 4 people you can come.
How long is the wait usually to be seated?
For when, tomorrow or weekday or?
For next Wednesday, the 7th.
Oh no, it's not too busy. You can come for 4 people, okay?
Oh, I gotcha. Thanks.
Bye bye.
person on the other side wasn't quite that strong with English, and of course, there was this other unpredictable factor. In other words, artificial intelligence and voice synthesis can handle that. And look how natural these voices sounded. Nothing like Siri or Alexa anymore. So in short, so many jobs are under threat. We've heard about autonomous vehicles or driverless cars. The one thing that strikes me about the projections about this is that because you don't really need 90% of the existing cars on the road once you have this. And why? Because you can summon them the way you summon a Grab car. So you can actually reduce the car fleet on the road by that much, then you'll free up a whole lot of parking lots, aside from other things, for more productive uses. And then we keep worrying about the future of agriculture in this country because few young people want to go back to the farms of their elders especially. But that's changing because technology and the rapid advance therein, both in production and information technology, has started to make it much more appealing to young people again. Well, earlier, Dr. Baldwin mentioned Watson, a product of IBM, which in short can actually be much better than a lawyer because it has all the jurisprudence of the world stored in the cloud and has access to it. It can be much better than a doctor in diagnosing cancer. So again, as said earlier by Dr. Baldwin, it's not only just the manual labor that is actually at risk, but also the job of professionals as well. You may have heard about Tesla's Powerwall and how it will allow you to store the energy that you generate from your solar panels on your roof, and by so doing, wean yourselves from the grid. And if you imagine self-independent households just relying on solar panels with a good battery, the whole power industry will be changed. Well, there's a picture there of a drone delivering a pizza. It's already happening in other parts of the world. But the other thing that has not been mentioned so far, but that's very, very instrumental to rapid change, is blockchain, along with the Internet of Things, because it is disrupting the disruptors. If they say that Uber and Grab has disrupted the taxi industry, with blockchain, you don't even need a party like Uber to connect drivers with the riders, because now they can go straight to one another with the track records of each already directly stored in the blockchain and accessible to all. So in short, things are rapidly changing, even as we have seen rapid changes already. Now, the next thing I wanted to put into the picture was our own population uniqueness. This is a pattern. This is the profile of the Japan population as of about 4 years ago. And think of it as a bar graph, horizontal bar graph. The right is females, the left is males. Age goes up from bottom to the top. And Japan finds itself with a lot of elderly population now, and a very narrow base, very few children to take over the next working age members of the population. But the projection of demographers is that by 2050, it will look like this. Really top heavy, a lot of elderly people that need to be cared for. And that's the reason why there's this renegotiation of the PIDS so that we can send more nurses and caregivers to Japan, and even farmers as well. And again, they're scared of that fact about a very narrow base of successor generation of workers. Thailand looks like this right now. The other thing here, while they have a bulge of working age, they have a very narrow base of a successor generation to take over. And 2050, they are projected to look like this, similar to Japan, although not as drastic. So again, they're already worried, even now, of their aging populations. In contrast, this is how we look. Oops. Let me go to the present first. Again, a very broad base, because we love making babies in this country. So this kind of profile is really what we have right now. And 2050, it will look like what people have been describing as a demographic sweet spot. Now, if you look at the other two graphs and this one, you can see that the OFW phenomenon is probably going to be really here to stay. We are going to end up, like it or not, as exporters of human resources. And in the face of the globalization that we're now talking about, the Globotics and the RI and the AI revolutions, then we ask ourselves, where do we fit in, given that we will have that advantage? It's going to be millennials and Gen Z, of course, who dominate the workforce. Now, the thing is, they say that the goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds, but a millennial has an attention span of 8 seconds. So with that kind of a situation, you really have a different kind of worker base right now. And here are some of the attributes that psychologists have listed down. Among other things, statistics apparently say that those between 18 and 34 on the average change jobs 10 times. So it made me wonder about the security of tenure law, whether it's the employers who need security rather than the employees, given this kind of behavior of the younger people now in the workforce. But things like avoiding rigid work styles and schedules, remote work or work from home is now very common. Because that's what suits this younger generation of workers. Now note that this is a generation that were born into the internet age, so that they don't know what the world is like, how it would be without the internet. So that kind of technology has to be part and parcel of the work that this generation of workers do. So the implications include, again, accepting high turnover of workers, and so that it may be the employers who will need security of employment law rather than the other way around. Again, the need to embrace and apply technology in the workplace, invest in developing soft skills, not so much the technical skills, which are very easy to acquire now online, but things like persuading and influencing, working in teams, communicating articulately, etc., which in fact right now employers are saying they need more. So again, in the face of the new jobs of the globalized world, it is these so-called core competencies or soft skills even that we may need. But the other thing that's very common now is too much suicides among the youth, because the stresses of the workplace, because of these new circumstances, seems to be too much for too many young people to take, and that's why that stress has to be managed. And that's why we have workplaces like Google and even Globe, I saw in BGC, have a very different ambiance in their workplace. It looks more like a relaxation place than a workplace. But that's really to suit this younger generation of workers. Now, a very quick word on the global economic balance. And right now, the dominant part there is the US-China trade war. So I will not go into these recent steps that have escalated the war. But what have been the impacts? Well, in the US, all their imports from China definitely have slid down. But look, even the imports out from not from China have already been sliding down as well. And that simply means that world trade, in fact, has generally slowed down. And it's for this reason that there's a worry that indeed global slowdown and recession may be coming. We have been talking about opportunistic gains that even we can take advantage of, but Vietnam is actually the biggest winner in the neighborhood. They are attracting not only the trade, but also FDI out of China in serving the US market, to which they have much better access now. But the R word really is the one that's looming because of this global slowdown resulting from that. What does IMF say in the year ahead? We expect 3.2% global growth. But that's not going to come from the big countries. It's going to come from the emerging markets and developing economies, including ourselves. Now, note one thing. They project that the growth in these kinds of economies are going to be 4.1%. So even though it was bad news that our GDP growth slowed down to 5.5%, it's still among the fastest growth rates in the world. So we can still be quite proud of the fact that we are there. So finally, let me just close by something that I try to warn all my audiences about the biggest threat to our future in this globalizing world. And the fact is, 1 in every 3 young children is stunted because of severe malnutrition. Now, physiologists and psychologists tell us that 90% of brain development of a person happens within his first 5 years of life. And if within those 5 years, a child is severely malnourished and physically manifested in stunting, meaning a height well below the median for that age, then we have a generation that may be damaged for life. Brain scans of a healthy child versus a stunted child show much, much less white matter in the brain, which is what we need for cognitive ability, memory, intellect, and so on. And again, once that is compromised at age 5, that damage is for life. So that if you realize that 1 out of 3 children now are having that problem, what I showed you earlier about the demographic sweet spot may turn out to be a demographic time bomb. 1 out of 3 of those Filipino workers, yes, we have abundant numbers of them, but 1 out of 3 may actually be a very compromised working class, low productivity, misfits, hopefully not drug addicts and criminals. But this is the biggest threat to us right now, and I even point out that it's already with us, the problem, because stunting had been 30 to 40% in the Philippines since the 1980s or even earlier. Our current working age people are products of a situation where more than 1 out of 3 were severely malnourished and therefore did not have maximum brain development. A somewhat controversial study that compared countries across the world, and I picked out only the ASEAN countries here, showed that the Philippines has the lowest average IQ in the ASEAN. And could this be the result precisely of stunting that had been plaguing us for generations now? In fact, I will not go into it right now, but I just wanted to mention that this is one of the impacts, I think, of the fact that our rice has been twice more expensive than in our neighbors. Why? Because of our stubborn insistence on shielding our markets from rice. The compelling need is make food affordable and feed the young children if we are going to even have a good future at all in this globalizing world. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat.
Because we want you to have that free lunch, we're going to truncate the Q&A, and instead of calling up the panel, my colleague Carla here will bring a mic to Calum and to Justice Carpio. If there's a question from the audience, one each for Calum and for Justice Carpio, please raise your hand or go to one of the mics. There's one there already. Is that for Justice Carpio or for Calum?
For the Honorable Justice Carpio.
Okay. Justice Carpio, please. Go ahead with your question. Could you introduce yourself?
I'm Dan Agustin, Masaganang Sakahan. I rice producer in Maguindanao Farm. Thank you, Justice, for the excellent presentation. My question is on investment and economy. Can we enter into an arrangement with a foreign investor or a country like fishing agreement or exploration on the West Philippine Sea or in our so-called exclusive economic zone, say on a 40-60 arrangement? And if you may follow up to Honorable Sheila Habito, please. We have now a challenge on stunting, and basically that is food and agriculture. Our agriculture is down right now. What would be our strategy so that agriculture will take off and probably we can export to China, where the population is exploding right now? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Justice Carpio.
Yes, thank you for that question. We have signed an MOU with China to cooperate on gas exploration and oil exploration. In that MOU, China agreed that CNOOC, China National Offshore Company, will enter into a commercial contract with any of our service contractors. And we're looking here at Reed Bank, and the service contractor is Forum Energy. In other words, China will tell its commercial enterprise, China National Company, sign a commercial agreement with Forum Energy, either as you buy equity into Forum Energy or you become a subcontractor of Forum Energy. Now, in the contract of Forum Energy with the Philippine government, it states there that Forum Energy recognizes that Philippines has sovereign rights over the gas. That's very clear. And Forum Energy is providing services to the Philippine government, and in payment, the Philippine government will pay either cash or kind in gas. So it's very clear that Forum Energy recognizes we have sovereign rights. If CNOOC steps into the shoes of Foreign Energy as subcontractor or as equity holder, impliedly China will be recognizing we have sovereign rights. And that is why I have supported the MOU. But are we there already? Well, I said, that's just one document. Let's wait for the TOR. The TOR was signed afterwards, and the TOR mirrors what's in the MOU. In other words, China agreed to implement the MOU using the same structure. They will enter as a subcontractor or a service contractor. And that's fine with us. When President Duterte went to Beijing recently, we exchanged the names for the members of the Joint Steering Committee to implement the MOU and the TOR. So, I have always viewed the South China dispute in three phases. First phase, China said, we have indisputable sovereignty. When the ruling came out, China said, meet us halfway. I asked the Chinese, what do you mean halfway? Half of the sovereign rights or half of the income? They refused to answer. There is a third phase where China will impliedly or expressly recognize our sovereign rights, but they will be the service contractor and get 40–50% of the revenue. MOU and the TOR and exchange of members places the dispute now in the third phase. Are we in the third phase? I think we are. Of course, China can always walk out. But we are there, and the next step for the Philippine government is to name now Forum Energy as a party to talk to CNOOC, and they will discuss commercial terms. If that happens, then we have solved the problem of the South China Sea dispute. I have talked to the Vietnamese, and they said, we are willing to do that also. As long as we have sovereign rights, we are prepared to give them 40%. Anyway, right now we are paying Shell about 40–50% already. It's no skin off our back if we pay CNOOC the same amount. And CNOOC is clearly not claiming they have sovereign rights because they will just step into the shoes of Forum Energy. So they say that the lasting legacy of President Aquino was the arbitral ruling. I think if we clinch this, the lasting legacy of President Duterte would be to implement quietly the ruling. And this will be South China Sea wide, because this same formula will be offered by China to Vietnam, and I've talked to the Vietnamese scholars. It's acceptable to them. I suppose it will be acceptable to Vietnam, to Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. So we are in the cusp of a final settlement of the maritime dispute, not the territorial dispute. Is it certain? No, I cannot say, because China can always walk away. But the major elements are there. And hopefully, we will stay the course. As long as China comes in as a service contractor, we are safe. We are not waiving any of our sovereign rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Carpio. Is there a question for the birthday celebrant? Calum Cameron? Question? Yes, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Ida Chongson. I'm a fintech and governance advocate. Okay, Estonia has been named one of the most advanced in digital society, one of the first in coin or token offering, as well as blockchain. Yet, it's also one of the lowest in online and credit card frauds. Philippines is just starting digitalization, yet we have seen already a few online scammers. Now, Estonia, at the same time, is also among the countries strong in good governance, ethics, transparency. You mentioned in your 7 points, trust, which I actually picked up. Has good governance played a major role in building the trust in the system? Or could it be the low scam rate is just a factor of the population size?
Thanks for the question. So yeah, obviously the population size is going to affect the numbers. And Estonia is number one in the world for a lot of things if you do it on a per capita basis. It's not hard. But so when it comes to online fraud or to scams, I mean, there's a little over, I think the average is a little over one per day in Estonia. But of course, being in the digital world, the population actually doesn't have a lot to do with it, because we're surrounded by the billions of people who are online, who might take advantage of all the opportunities that Estonia has to offer for getting into the systems there. A really good example here is Estonia's been in the news recently for some pretty massive money laundering that was going from Russia and Ukraine, and ending up in offshore UK accounts. And so Estonia was sort of held out because a lot of the transactions took place in branches in Estonia. The things to point out there are that they would never have been done in Estonia, or they couldn't have been done in Estonia going to Estonian accounts, because the level of transparency in Estonia means that we know exactly who is behind each business, who's behind each account. They can't hide. So what happened was the money went into big foreign banks, Deutsche Bank, Danske, who had branches in Estonia. The processing was efficient in Estonia, and it wasn't, I don't believe it actually came under the Estonian AML requirements, because it was done, the transactions were actually, also the management was done elsewhere, and the money ended up in UK accounts because they don't have to be transparent about who the ownership is. So I guess the good governance is there in that respect. The structures are set up to make sure there's absolute transparency. And also, I think, going back to my point about the system was built by engineers. So from the start, it was built to deliver its purpose. It was these are the things we need. We need transparency. We need it to be trusted. So these are the things that have to be done. And as politicians, you can't argue us out of that. To be fair, I mean, the politicians were pretty visionary when they backed this. They were very bold when they did this. There were some who argued against it. But yeah, so I think the good governance definitely, but again, trust the engineers. If you give them the right directions, they will build what you need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking the excellent panelists and presenters today. Lunch is upon us. Please enjoy your lunch.
Thank you very much to our session moderator and all our panelists. Just a few reminders before we break for lunch. So shortly after lunch, we will have the 4 parallel sessions. Please refer to your sticker IDs for the session that you have chosen. If you are wearing a green sticker ID, you are in session 1, which is on worsening inequality. This will be held at the Visayas function room, which is just on the room next to this parallel hall. And then for session 2 on global trade restructuring, that is if you're wearing a yellow sticker ID, this will be held at the Boracay function hall. And for session 3, that is if you're wearing the orange sticker ID, it will be held at the Davao function room. So to reach Boracay and Davao function rooms, you have to take the staircase or use the escalator, and you have to pass through the Spiral restaurant. And if you are wearing a pink sticker ID, you have to go to Romblon, Mindoro, which is on the same floor as this parallel hall, as this plenary hall, but you have to walk around to reach that function room. Another reminder, please complete the seminar feedback form that we gave you when you register. Your feedback, your comments and suggestions are important to us. Please hand them over to our registration people or to one of our ushers. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch. And please make sure that you're back here at this plenary hall at 4 p.m. for our afternoon plenary session. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.